Today I effed up by making a joke about my famous influencer ex in my stand-up routine and getting sued. I dated a famous Instagram and TikTok influencer and she broke up with me about a year ago. It was a rocky relationship and we didn't treat each other well. She had this online persona about being health conscious and staying positive, but behind closed doors, she was an extremely negative and cruel person. She would often get angry with me and make fun of my appearance or tell me that she was out of my league. It always disgusted me to see how she could be so nasty to me, but then take her phone out and put on that fake happy persona while she was in front of the camera. When our relationship ended I was hurt at first, then started to feel relieved. She has her entire audience fooled into thinking she's this sweet person and I can't believe she managed to fool me as well for a period of time. Anyway, we met at a party in LA, I was just starting to do stand-up then and I wasn't totally comfortable on stage yet. I stopped performing for a while during the time we were dating because she made me feel very insecure, and I didn't feel confident to get on stage because of what she was doing to my self-esteem. After we finally broke up, I wrote up a new routine, and one of my big jokes at the end is about her and her fakeness online. Just to be clear, I do not use her name in the routine, but my ex is a huge influencer with loads of followers, and the times I have performed this routine, some people shouted guesses and got it right. I would never confirm the audience's guesses, and again, I never said her name. The joke was a hit every single time I performed it. I started to build a lot of confidence in my stand-up skills and I've been performing regularly for a couple of months now. I knew better than anyone what a petty person my ex was, but I never saw her going this far. About a month ago I received a cease and desist in the mail from her lawyer. I ignored it since I had not been using her name and I hadn't revealed her identity at all in my routine. I kept the joke in my routine and performed it at all the shows I had booked for that month. Well, about 2 weeks ago the clip of the joke ended up going viral on TikTok. I got a bunch of new followers and I was happy. However, like I said, my ex is popular on TikTok, and in the comments of my video a lot of people had connected the dots. I was happy my clip was doing numbers and growing my platform until I got another letter from my ex's lawyer yesterday. This one said that she has decided to move forward and sue me for defamation. I was so pissed that she was this mad about my success, so I've decided to fight the case since I know I'll win anyway. I have proof of her treating me awfully during the time we dated. I also have proof that backs up the story I tell about her in the joke. At the end of the day, I'm kinda happy to get under her skin and I hope people keep guessing correctly about who my ex is. She deserves to get exposed for being the hateful bitch that she is.
My boyfriend stole my medication. He said he did it to save me. Long story extremely short, I had an accident a couple weeks ago and needed surgery. Since it was relatively invasive, I was prescribed an opiate to take for my pain. My boyfriend, who I've been with for a few months, has been helping me with basic things that I was having trouble with right after surgery. He, as well as other members of his family, have had issues with substance addiction and he made it very clear that I wouldn't be allowed to do any substances or smoke if I was going to be around him. It was no issue because I never did anything like that before I met him anyway. When he picked up my prescription before we left the hospital, he saw the medication I would be taking and told me, "You can't have this." Then we had a whole argument about it before we even left the hospital. His point was I could just take Tylenol, and that these things are addictive. I don't know anyone since I moved away pretty recently, so he's the only one who would be able to help take care of me, so I agreed. Not even a day went by and I was in so much pain and I told him that I needed my meds. He again started arguing with me and we came to the agreement that he would hold on to them and give them to me when I needed them. Not what I wanted, but it seemed like a fair compromise. A little over a week later, now, my pain is getting worse and not better. I was only taking 2 a day, maybe 10 hours apart, but I was in really bad pain halfway through the day, so I asked him for my meds, and he told me I can't have one until later when I usually take it. I told him I need it now because I was literally shaking in pain and he told me, it's withdrawal and I'm becoming too dependent. At this point I'm getting pissed because I'm in pain and can barely stand and he won't tell me where my meds are. So I start looking around for them and the whole time he was yelling, "I'm not going to let this happen to you too. I won't let you fall victim like I did." Not only was he making me even more mad, but he was being so embarrassing with all the crazy stuff he was saying. I get that he doesn't want me to get addicted, but he barely even knows me. He ended up leaving a couple hours ago, but not before telling me how grateful I'll be for him saving my life. Since he left, I'm guessing he took the meds with him, so I'm not even bothering to look anymore. So now I'm sitting alone in my bed dreading the fact that I'm gonna have to drive myself to the hospital.
I threw my parents' favorite line back in their faces during an argument and it humiliated them. I'm currently 27 years old. Growing up I had always been the kid who my parents didn't give a crap about. As the middle child, it was always, "Oh, your sibling needs us more." And my needs were quite often just not met. Any attempt to get my parents to do something with or for me was met with being called selfish and told my siblings' needs came before mine right now. Neither of my siblings have special needs, they are just both kind of spoiled brats. My brothers, 30 and 25, are the golden oldest child and their precious baby. I was the unwanted girl child in the middle. They made this clear in all sorts of ways, from not wanting to pay for my school supplies and wanting me to figure it out, to the way birthdays were treated, to Christmas. Forget them showing up to anything for me, but I was expected to drop everything to show up to any and everything my brothers did. My brothers both got brand new cars for their 16th birthdays, but I didn't need one. I got a rusty bike they found at a garage sale and told if I could fix it up, they guessed I could have it. I fixed it up, and they gave it to my brother instead. I moved in with my aunt on my 18th birthday. I'm getting married to a wonderful woman, and my parents just recently found out. They called me several kinds of butthurt as to why I hadn't told them and then immediately started in on how I couldn't do certain things because of my brothers. I can't have a nice chicken or fish dish, it has to be steak or pizza or they won't eat it. I can't be too affectionate because you know how guys get around two girls being together. I can't have a wedding party if they can't be involved. I finally snapped. I told them that neither they nor my apparently perverted brothers were invited. That, for once, something was about me, not them. I told them that I had no interest in making my wedding about their crappy sons, who have achieved nothing in life so far because they babied them to the point of uselessness. My wedding was not about what they wanted. My mother cried, and my father asked why I was treating them so poorly. I said, "You're just being selfish, my needs come before yours right now." There was a stunned silence before my father told me that it wasn't fair that I would say that to them because this was a different situation. I hung up and blocked them both, but my cousin, who I'm close to, said they were making a huge ordeal out of it. They've been calling other family members and then being surprised when they're told yes, they can believe I'd not want them making my wedding about them or my brothers. My mother apparently posted a long "woe is me, where did I go wrong" post on FB but took it down after my aunt lit her up in the comments about where she went wrong. My older brother reached out just once to ask if he really wasn't invited, and I said yeah, he really wasn't. He seemed a little upset, but at this point, I don't even care. All he said after that was that I shouldn't have said what I did to our parents and that they are upset they aren't invited to the wedding, and even if I didn't invite him or our other brother, I should at least invite them. I refused and hung up. My parents and brothers don't know when or where we're getting married, I never intended to invite them, but eloping is starting to look pretty good right about now. My grandmother has reached out only once to say while she kind of understands why I don't want them there, it was kind of a blow low to throw the line they always used on me back in their faces. I thought maybe I'd get some third-party opinions here, but I don't think I was wrong. People who moved countries and left their old lives behind, why? 18 years ago, I came to know that my son wasn't mine. He was 3 when I found out my wife cheated on me with my best friend. I was devastated. Needless to say we got divorced, and my ex didn't suffer any consequences. The court doesn't care if the kid is your biological child or not. You have to pay child support. My ex was vindictive so she intentionally quit her job so that she could get more money. After 6 months of this I reached my breaking point. At that time a work friend of mine joked that I should just leave this country. That's when it hit me. I am not going to spend the next 15 years of my life caring for the bad decisions my ex made. I started to plan my exit. I took out all the money from my bank account. I quit my job and sold my car. I also sold some of my belongings. I never said a word to anyone except for my mom. She knows where I am and I am 100% sure she won't snitch. The last thing I said to my ex was I would rather die than pay a single penny to you via text. From there I boarded my flight and went to a country further away where they cannot find me. I came to the new country by plane and from there I journeyed by road to a nearby country. It is a third world country with a lot of greeneries. It wasn't that hard because I bribed the border guards and they let me into the country. From there, I started to teach English in a primary school in a village. I was mostly traveling every 6 months because staying in one place at that time could be dangerous. I changed my name and also all my documents. There were some official documents that I couldn't because they asked for your passport number. I still work as a teacher but on the side, I have a small side business. I am married to the most amazing and kind woman I have ever met and together we have 2 daughters. Now aside from my mom, my wife also knows about my past life and she has been really supportive of me. The people in this country have accepted me as their own. They always come forward to help us. This country might be behind in many things but I do not have any lacking. I do not live a lavish life here but I can get whatever I want if I spend money. Literally there is a guy for everything. Edit, my ex-wife just found me through this post. F my life. I finally met the most elite Karen and it was insane. Guys. I actually met a stereotypical Karen. I was at the grocery store because, of course, that's where these things occur. I like my local shop a lot. It's small, the staff and shoppers are diverse, and they have a great reduced section. I'm all about shopping there once a week or so. On this fine day, I was exhausted after work and just wanted to pick up bread and milk as usual, but I noticed that they seemed to be reducing their Asian cuisine. Japanese curry? Heck yeah, let's get some of that. Udon noodles? Yes, please. To keep a short story short, I had a lovely basket of consumables when I got to the checkout. The lady in front of me was having a bad day, apparently. Otherwise, I'm not sure why she was yelling at the obviously teenage cashier. An older woman had come over who I am guessing was a supervisor just before I rocked up with my food, so I didn't hear the beginning, but I did hear, quite literally, I want my discount. Friends, I was tired, and while I wasn't 100% sure what was up, this customer was just being mean. She didn't call anyone a B, but her tone was awful. And the line wasn't moving, so I admit to my selfish motives. This is word for word because I just got home. I know it probably sounds ridiculous, but it actually happened. Me, hey, ma'am, why are you yelling at these nice people? Her, she looked at me oddly, like, why are you getting involved? My coupons need to be fixed. Me, well, it's probably not their fault. Again, it is a highly crowded supermarket, and I'm sure everyone just wants to go home. Supervisor, muttering, well, some people seem to think it is. My guys, I almost started laughing then and there. But I actually said, well, let's all just be nicer to each other. That would make the world better, right? In the most obnoxiously cheerful voice I could muster. Miss Karen just paid at that point, but she asked for a manager. I loudly mentioned that the customer service desk was right there and pointed. I was just done, folks, just done, and also so incredibly proud of myself that I rode that train. She actually huffed off with her bag of food and did not see the customer service desk. I can't stop being amused because this is the kind of story I wouldn't believe. And to put another cherry on top, I swear you guys, while the cashier was just kind of quiet and awkward, honestly, the poor lass was probably 16, I needed to buy a reusable bag, and she couldn't see the tag on it. The supervisor said to just give it to me. I know that is 100% and then everybody clapped. Kind of ending, but I think that perhaps this lady was just done. The bag was only 99 cents. The moral of the story is just to be nice. I assume Karen was having a bad day, but she didn't have to take it out on a kid. I threw away my favorite teacher's family heirloom. When I was younger, I had a really sweet teacher that we all loved called Miss W. It was a Catholic school, so in the corner of every classroom was an altar with a Bible, a cross, and some prayers. Miss W added a large crystal to the altar that she told us had been passed down from her great-grandmother. It rested on a small orange cloth at the front of the altar. 3 times a week when we lined up to go to assembly, I would line up next to it and look at it. It was so smooth and shiny that I couldn't help but want it for myself, and soon I was plotting how I could take it. I took it one morning on the way to assembly and stashed it in my treasure box at home. I was always worried every time a teacher called me that I had been caught and would be punished for taking it, and this paranoia plagued me for 2 years until one day I went into my back garden and threw it into a random neighbor's backyard. Unfortunately, I never had an opportunity to give it back and apologize, as the year after I left Miss W's class she got married and moved away to the seaside. About 4 years after she left, one of her former colleagues told me that she still remembered me from her class. I of course didn't tell her what happened, and in fact, I've never told anyone. Anyways, after another incident of stealing someone else's family heirloom, I decided at the ripe old age of 9 that I would never steal again. There was a lesson to be learned here, but I doubt that I truly managed to learn it. If I had a penny for every time I've stolen a family heirloom, I'd have 2 pennies, which isn't a lot, but it's definitely weird that it's happened twice. What secret are you taking to your grave? Years ago, my girlfriend Deb and I were out with her friend Sarah. This one day Sarah had to pin unlock her phone each time to take one of many pictures. Out the corner of my eye I saw her pin. I saved it in a note. Months later Sarah and Deb were at my place and went to the pool. Sarah left her phone indoors. I used her password and hit jackpot. Explicit photos, videos, message logs with some guy she was talking to, who we'll call Jeff, along with tons of PP pics and videos of him jacking it. Now Deb was hot, but Sarah was an obese chick that worked her ass off and became a 11 out of 10. With this goldmine of pics and vids I concocted a slow plan, very slow. Slowly I broke off with Deb but kept in touch with Sarah. I then created an alter ego online, we'll call it Vanessa. For months I worked this identity so it looked real. This identity started following Sarah on all social media. Sarah accepted any friend requests. Vanessa blackmailed Jeff. Jeff was given 2 days to stop talking to Sarah or his PP pics got leaked. He was chicken shit and dropped her like a hot potato. But Sarah was strong-willed. When Vanessa threatened Sarah to stop talking to Jeff or her pics get leaked, she protested. I knew I had to change tactics. Vanessa disappeared for a while until I could get Sarah's phone in my hands for a bit. One day Sarah was over and lost her phone at my place. I found it for her the next day. Not before I installed a spy app that let me keep track of her everything. A few weeks later Vanessa came back, but now armed with the conversations Sarah was having with everyone. While tracking Sarah's reactions and suspicions, I made it show that Vanessa wasn't real. Now all my friends know me as being pretty tech literate. One day I'm talking with Sarah and she breaks down crying, telling me how she'd been long distance texting this guy and somebody hacked his or her phone and now she's being blackmailed by some stranger she doesn't know. So she asked me if I could help her. Long ending short, I made it look like Jeff was Vanessa. I made it look like he created this person so that he could blackmail Sarah into messed up intimate stuff. Sarah left him, and guess who was the hero? Me. I caught Vanessa. Sarah was now safe because of me. Once we blackmailed the guy, Vanessa disappeared. You know, for realism. Sarah and I now had this tragedy, this hurdle that we overcame together. We started dating not long after. She was never going back to long-distance relationships and wanted to try local. 4 years later we are married. Librarians who have been involved in a real-life mystery. What's your story? I was working as a librarian in a small town. The library was housed in a historic building, known for its vast collection of rare and antique books. One day, a strange incident turned my mundane job into a real-life mystery. A regular patron, an elderly man named Mr. Whitaker, came in requesting a specific book. It was an old, obscure text that hadn't been checked out in years. I went to retrieve it from the archives, but to my surprise, the book was missing. I apologized to Mr. Whitaker and promised to look into it. I checked the library records, but there was no record of the book being checked out. It was as if the book had just vanished. Over the next few days, I turned the library upside down looking for the book but found no trace of it. I was about to give up when I received a mysterious note in the library's suggestion box. It was a riddle, and when I solved it, it led me to a hidden compartment behind one of the bookshelves. Inside the compartment was the missing book. But that wasn't all. Along with the book was a letter, written by the library's founder. The letter revealed that the library was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and the book was a coded guide for those seeking freedom. The discovery was shocking. I had been working in the library for years, oblivious to its historic significance. The news spread quickly, and the library became a historic landmark. As for Mr. Whitaker, he revealed that he was a descendant of the library's founder and had known about the secret all along. He had sent me on the quest to ensure the legacy wasn't lost. From that day forward, my job was anything but mundane. I had become the keeper of a piece of history, a secret guardian of the past, and every time I passed that bookshelf, I was reminded of the mystery I had unraveled, the secret that had been hiding in plain sight. My vegan daughter wants my whole family to quit meat, so I gave her two choices. My daughter decided recently that she wanted to be vegan. We've always been a meat-eating family, and bacon and eggs for breakfast is a tradition in our home. Still, my wife and I are trying our best to be fully supportive of her choice. We've been learning about vegan cooking, trying new recipes, and adjusting our budget to include vegan substitutes for her. It's been all good until recently. One day, she got upset when she saw me cooking bacon in a pan and rinsing it out for the dishwasher. She claimed that the pan I was using was her vegan pan and got really angry. I was surprised and explained that the pan is a family pan, older than she's been alive, and that she couldn't claim it. To make her feel more comfortable, I agreed to buy her a separate pan for vegan cooking. I even got her colored ones to help me remember not to use them by accident. But that still didn't solve the problem. She's now started saying that the dishwasher is contaminated with animal products and the fridge has my bacon grease fingers on it because I touch it after cooking bacon. I do wash my hands, but even the slightest presence of meat seems to upset her. My daughter had an intervention with our family and said that she needed us all to go vegan, too. I was astounded. She wasn't even asking us, she was demanding. However, my daughter cooks less than either me or my wife and makes no contribution to all the expensive vegan groceries. I told her, in no unclear terms, that she could either continue to be vegan quietly while the rest of us ate meat, or she could go to her grandparents' house where they own a farm to see what the world really thinks about vegans. She started crying, calling me insensitive and mean, but I think she took it too far with all these demands. How do I get her to see my side? My boyfriend didn't buy me perfume, so I broke up with him. I, 21F, am really into beauty, makeup, skincare, perfumes, etc., and collect perfumes. There's one perfume I've been wanting for quite some time now, but it's been way out of my budget. I'm a college student working a part-time job at the movie theater which pays about $13 an hour and I have other priorities to pay for, so it's taken a while for me to save up. I'd finally saved up the amount I needed and was planning on buying myself the perfume as a birthday gift. My b-day was 2 days ago. I told my boyfriend, 17 male, this and he told me to go spend my money on something else and he'd buy me the perfume instead. I told him he didn't have to considering it's expensive, but he insisted. A few days before my birthday I asked him if he was sure about buying it and told him again that I had no problem buying it myself. He told me not to worry about it and said he'd already bought and wrapped it. I thanked him and figured since he'd already bought it that I could spend my money on something else. I took my best friend and my younger sister out to a nice restaurant and to the movies after. I wasted more than half the money I'd saved up but obviously didn't think anything of it. So on my birthday my boyfriend gave my gift and it was a body spray and bath bomb. I asked him what happened to the perfume and he told me it was a lot more expensive than he'd expected and way out of his budget. I got mad at him and asked him why he lied to me and told me to waste my money on something else when he could have easily told me he couldn't afford it and I'd have bought it myself. He called me a spoiled brat and said I was expecting too much from him. I called him a piece of lying poop and left after that. I got a few texts from him and his friends calling me names and saying I was using him for money. I also got a text from his mom, who I had a great relationship with, calling me childish for throwing temper tantrums when I didn't get my way. I honestly don't see how I'm in the wrong here, but I'm not the type of person to not say sorry if I am. People who have been kidnapped, what was it like? I was around 18 years old, we'd been dating for about 8 months and I broke up with him because my parents were treating me differently and I didn't like it. It put too much strain on both my boyfriend and I, and my parents and I's relationship and I couldn't take it. Broke up with him one night and about a week later he showed up at my parents' house wanting to talk to me. My mom answered the door, I didn't want any part of it, so she told him to go away. He got belligerent and eventually left, so she called the police. He was pulled over, and given a warning, then they let him be. Dad was at work, mom took sister somewhere, and I was playing Mario Party 8 on my Wii at home. There was a knock at the back door and I looked through the glass from the couch and he was there looking and trying to talk to me. Again, I didn't want any part of it so I ignored him. He got mad and shouldered the door. The frame cracked. He did it again and the door burst open. I said, "What the F are you doing?" And he grabbed me and put me over his shoulder and carried me outside. I figured he was just going to put me in the front seat and leave with me, but then he popped the trunk of his car with the remote and I realized what was going to happen. I twisted a little, which surprised him, and he dropped me, but then he put me in a headlock where I couldn't breathe and I stopped struggling. He tossed me in the trunk and shut it and drove off. At this point, I was doing everything I could to get out of the trunk, so I started kicking the back of the seats to get out. I eventually got one open enough to stick my head through to get some air. It was in August, and the temperatures outside were riding 95 degrees, so inside the trunk was about 110. I got my head out and could finally breathe. He had calmed down a bit, and I knew he just wanted to talk to me, so he didn't really freak when I was able to climb into the back seat. When he was putting me in the trunk, the neighbor kids were outside and they saw what was happening and ran inside to tell their parents. Parents called the police called my mom, and my mom was doing 95 down the highway to get home. Ex-boyfriend drove me an hour and a half away to an old camp he used to go to and we talked for a while. He then took me to Pizza Hut because I said I was hungry. I remember wondering why no one was concerned that I was waiting for a pizza without shoes or socks on. Because no one said anything, I figured my parents hadn't realized what had happened yet. Little did I know, an Amber Alert had already been issued. Anyways, he decided he didn't want to go to jail, so he was going back to his house to get a shotgun. When he got there, the cops were waiting for him and tried to taser him. They missed and he jumped back in his car and did a backwards U-turn. He started driving through the city at speeds of 60 to 85 miles per hour. If you've never been in a high-speed police pursuit, let me tell you, it's a rush. So much adrenaline. Anyways, he was going to get on the highway but the police had it blocked off with spike strips, so he turned onto a back road that dead-ended. He ended up crashing into a tree. I was in the front seat by this time. The cops swarmed the car, pulled us both out, and since they didn't realize who we were, cuffed us both and put us in separate cop cars. Once everything was situated, they uncuffed me and put me in a police SUV and transported me back to the police station in my city. Parents and sister were there, freaked out, found out I was okay. The whole ordeal lasted around 10 hours. X got 4 years and is now out of jail in a halfway house. I'm a babysitter and the parents left me a terrifying set of rules to follow. I've only been babysitting for about 6 months now. It was an easy way to make money and easy way to hook up with multiple guys at once. It was slow going at first, but a couple of months ago I hit the jackpot after a young couple from the rich part of my town asked me to look after their 2 kids one Friday night. They paid me $200 to look after their extremely well-behaved children for 3 hours in a house 5 times the size of mine. It was awesome. A couple of days ago a husband and wife had texted me asking if I could stay the night at their mansion and watch their 7-year-old little girl for them. I happily agreed, if only I knew what I was in for. When the day finally came I drove my beat-up Jeep Wrangler to the edge of the rich neighborhood and made my way up this private driveway that I had never noticed before because the entrance was hidden back amongst the trees that surround the entire north side of town. I drove up this steep, winding driveway for what seemed like 10 minutes before I finally saw the house come into view. Out of all the houses I've babysat at, this was hands down the most gorgeous one I've ever seen. It was a huge Victorian-style mansion that was covered in dark brown bricks, making it blend perfectly into the woods surrounding it. I got out of my car and made my way up to the front porch where I knocked on this gigantic, wooden door. A few seconds later a beautiful woman in her mid-30s answered and introduced herself as Mrs. Collins. She called her husband down and shortly after an extremely handsome man also in his 30s came walking down the grand stairway holding an adorable little girl in his arms. The couple seemed very anxious to leave, and even though they were both gorgeous people I could tell that underneath all of their beauty they were both extremely tired and haggard from having to keep up with their 7-year-old. They were obviously very excited about having an entire night to themselves and couldn't wait to get out of there as fast as they could. Before Mr. and Mrs. Collins left, however, Mrs. Collins handed me several pieces of paper and told me that she had written down a couple of instructions for me to follow throughout the night. She stressed to me how important it was to follow her instructions, and I assured her that I'd give them a look. I waved to the pretty young couple as they made their way down the driveway in their expensive Mercedes and then closed the door behind me. I gave the instructions a quick once over before folding the papers and stuffing them into my back pocket. I'll look at them later, I told myself. How stupid I was to do that. Mr. and Mrs. Collins' daughter, Samantha, was a very nice, young girl who warmed up to me almost immediately, and we had spent the next few hours playing games and watching TV. After we finished our 5th episode of Teen Titans Go I noticed that it was getting late and asked Samantha what her bedtime was. She shrugged, not really giving me an answer, which is when I remembered Mrs. Collins' instructions. I pulled out the folded pieces of paper and scanned through them very quickly when I saw the words Samantha needs to be in bed. Before 8 p.m. I checked the time to find that it was almost 7:45. Well, it looks like your bedtime is right now, I said. Lift Samantha up off the couch so I could get her ready. She brushed her teeth and I tucked her into her California king-size mattress. I told her good night and was leaving her room when she said something that stopped me in my tracks. Don't forget to lock my door before you leave, she said. I stopped walking and turned back around toward her confused. What do you mean don't forget to lock your door? I asked. Why would I need to lock your door? What if you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? She looked at me innocently and shrugged her shoulders again. I don't know, but mommy always locks my door before I go to sleep. She says she does it to protect me and herself. I don't remember what happens after I fall asleep, but mommy says that I always try to leave my room at night, which is a bad thing. I looked at her dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. Mommy told me that she would leave instructions for you to follow and locking my door is one of them, she said. Oh, okay Samantha, I'll lock your door. Good night sweetheart, I stammered. She gave me a big smile and rolled over in her bed. I closed her door and noticed that there was a latch drilled into the door frame that would allow someone to lock it from the outside. I closed the latch and then walked back downstairs so I could read the rest of Mrs. Collins' instructions. When I had first seen the pieces of paper I was under the impression that they were just instructions that told me what shows Samantha is not allowed to watch, or how to operate the surround sound. After I started reading them though I realized that I was wrong. I was completely and utterly wrong. Hello Annie, I'm so glad that you agreed to stay the night and babysit Samantha for us. She is such an angel, and I am sure that the both of you will get along very well. I know that our house might seem old and scary, but don't worry because nothing bad will happen to you as long as you follow some simple instructions. Firstly, Samantha needs to be in bed in her room with the door locked before 8 p.m. Do not open up her bedroom door after 8 p.m. I repeat, do not open Samantha's bedroom door after 8 p.m. She will try to convince you to open the door in many different ways. She will cry, scream, and threaten you until you give in, but do not listen to her. She can't hurt you as long as the door is closed. Between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. make sure you remain in the living room with the lights turned on. Around this time of night you may hear scratching and growling coming from Samantha's room, or from other parts of the house. These noises are nothing to worry about as long as you stay in the living room. Watch some TV to pass the time. We have a lot of movies to choose from. After 9:30 do not venture into any dark areas of the house. I would recommend that you turn on as many lights as you can before 9:30 so that you don't accidentally trap yourself. You might begin to see things hiding in the dark areas of the house from time to time, and sometimes they will even try to talk to you. Just ignore them and they'll eventually ignore you as well. You might also happen to see a pair of yellow cat eyes looking at you through the darkness every once in a while. Do not stare at them for more than 30 seconds. At around 10 p.m. it might begin to sound like there are several people walking around in the basement downstairs. Do not worry because as long as you stay out of the basement they cannot get to you. I know it sounds unlikely, but around this time you will begin to feel an overwhelming urge to walk down into the basement. If this happens, go into the kitchen and drink a cold glass of milk. This usually helps. The urge will most likely pass after about 10 minutes, but if the urge is still there after 10 minutes and you don't think that you will be able to stop yourself from walking into the basement, then call either me or Mr. Collins and we'll tell you what to do. When 10:30 comes around you will begin to hear something running back and forth in the hallway upstairs. Stay on the first floor of the house during this time. Don't worry about Samantha, as long as you locked her door beforehand he won't be able to get to her. If you start to hear him making his way down the stairs, then lock yourself in the first floor bathroom with the lights on. He will knock on the bathroom door repeatedly and will try impersonating someone close to you like your mom or your dad in order to trick you into opening the bathroom door for him. He is really good at it. No matter what he says to you and no matter who he sounds like, do not open the door. He should go away after 5 minutes. Check under the door to make sure that he is no longer there before you open it. Now this next part is very important. You will be sleeping in our guest room upstairs for the night. Before you go to bed, make sure that you leave a plate outside your bedroom door with a piece of raw steak on it. You can find the raw steak in our refrigerator, and leave a glass of milk next to the plate as well. On a piece of paper write the words Park Aunt Mihi in red ink and leave it on the plate with the raw meat. Also, at some point during the night you might wake up and notice that there is something standing in the corner of your room. Please refrain from looking at the figure as much as you can. I'd recommend wearing earbuds so that you won't hear it muttering to itself, and that's about it. There are also a few other general rules that you should follow throughout the night just to make sure that nothing bad happens. Rule 1. If the house phone rings at any point during the night, don't answer it no matter how long or how loud it might ring. Mr. Collins and I will call your cell phone if we need to talk with you. Rule 2. If you feel something tap you on the shoulder at any point during the night, don't turn around, and wait at least 30 seconds before moving again. Rule 3. Don't eat meat after 8 o'clock. They might see it as a threat and will most likely attack you. Thanks again, Annie. If you have any trouble or questions, feel free to call me or my husband at any point during the night. If you do call us and a man with a very deep voice answers the phone, hang up immediately and try calling us again. P.S. Throughout the night you might hear a dog whimpering from somewhere off inside the house. We don't have a dog, so don't go looking for it. I hadn't realized what I had gotten myself into. It is currently 8:31 p.m. as I am writing this, and the growling noises just started. It sounds like they're coming from every room in the fucking house. I thought that Samantha's screams from a couple minutes ago were going to be the worst part, but now I can hear her muffled growls from upstairs, and I can assure you that this is worse. This is so much worse. All I wanted to do is sleep with multiple guys, not deal with a possible haunted manor. What is the most terrifying dream you've had? An intimate dream about Voldemort. This actually happened last night, and I'm still traumatized. So before we get to the hook, let me start by saying, my girlfriend and I have recently completed a full start to finish Harry Potter marathon, and during the lockdown, I've been having some really weird dreams. So regarding the Harry Potter marathon, I was a big fan of the books as a kid but had never really gotten into the films. I'd seen the first two but never really bothered after that. When we finished the marathon, we were both in agreement that Voldemort isn't the impressive mastermind villain that I remembered from my childhood. If anything, he came off as quite comical. Constantly getting beaten by teenagers, super over-exaggerated wand movements, and some downright hilarious facial expressions. And when he hugged Malfoy in the last film, it was game over. All fear factors withered. This was not the terrifying dude I remembered reading about. That is, until the dream last night. I was tied to a wooden board with my arms and legs stretched out and bolted down, like someone was going to use me as a target. Voldemort entered the room in a dark robe, and slowly walked towards me. His robe dropped to the floor, and he was wearing nothing but a snakeskin thong. He started licking from my chest upwards, running his long slimy tongue up my chin, across my face, and finishing on my forehead. I woke up screaming like a little girl. By the time my eyes focused, my hand was bouncing off the side of my girlfriend's head. I had just punched my girlfriend in the side of the head. She was not happy. I spared her the details until the morning. Luckily, she was not hurt, only startled and knows I'm prone to sleepwalking. Once she heard the full story, she decided I can make it up to her by posting the full details of my intimate Voldemort dream online for internet strangers. And I cannot describe it as a terrifying nightmare. What is your biggest regret in life? Divorce. I was 18 when I got married. It was 1989, I was in love. We got married. He was 19. We welcomed our first daughter in 1990, second in 1991. We felt complete. Life was beautiful. My husband's business was doing great. We could afford a luxurious life with many amenities by God's grace. 4 years later we decided to have another baby. I was pregnant again. This time I wanted to have a boy. I used to pray for a boy. In 1996, my prayers were answered. I gave birth to a gorgeous baby boy. He had my eyes, he had my smile, and he had his father's finger shape. I was happy. 1 year later, my husband decided to expand his business. He moved his business from the capital of the country to the economic capital of the country. Initially he would come home every Friday and leave on Monday. This stopped after 2 months. His visits reduced. He didn't have any affair, he was very loyal, but he made his business his priority. We started fighting. Every time we spoke we only had arguments. This continued till 1999 February, when we decided to separate. I regret it. He bought us a house near our daughter's school. We decided that the daughters will stay with me and he took the custody of our 30-month-old baby. I fought for my son's custody but lost. We never remained in touch. 4 years ago, my husband got in touch with my daughters. They started spending time together. He would often meet them and call them. One day my daughters requested him to let them meet their brother. He agreed. I was happy I was finally going to meet my son after 15 years. I didn't know him at all. I didn't know how he looked, what he liked, nothing at all. When I met him, I realized how horrible I am as a mother. Because of my stupid decision, it was my son who suffered the most. He was put into a boarding school right away. My husband never met him in all these years. He was busy with his business. My baby was left there all alone. When other children went back to their homes during vacation, my baby had nowhere to go. He stayed there at the hostel. He had to eat horrible hostel food. He never came home for holidays. He doesn't know what a family is. He doesn't know what love is. For 15 years he was left all alone like an orphan, but my husband sent him money regularly. He was an orphan with money. I never got married after the divorce. I spent my life taking care of my daughters. I wish I can go back in time. I could have stayed there with my husband and took care of my baby. My precious little baby lost his childhood because of me. He deserves a better mother. It wasn't his fault. My toxic parents demanded I babysit my siblings for free after years of abuse. When I refused, they stole my things, so I threatened to call the police. I'm 20 and moved out of my parents' house at 18 because I really can't stand them. They were jerks, favored my younger siblings, used me as free child care, told me what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine, and all that BS. When I left, my dad told me not to let the door hit me on my way out and don't come back. I got the smallest, cheapest apartment I could find and have worked the same full-time job for 2 years. My parents didn't even hold out a month before calling me and begging me to come back home. Because without me someone else had to watch my siblings and they weren't happy about paying for a babysitter. I refused because now I finally had time for myself. My dad eventually called me and actually demanded I move back home and pay them rent instead because family is more important than my personal independence. I said back to him that my life is important too. For once I'm getting to live for myself. He basically said, well then see how long you can last without us. And we didn't talk for months. I don't know what he was hoping for because I managed well enough by myself. My family seemed to slowly accept that I wasn't going to come crawling back, and over time we seemed to mend things. I could tell they were having a hard time dealing with the fact things were on my terms and not theirs. They begged me to watch my youngest siblings from time to time, even though the two that are closest to me in age are in their mid-teens now. But my parents don't want to put babysitting on them any more than they have to, which is hypocritical of them since they tried to put it on me as much as possible. And yes, I have called them out on that. They responded with gaslighting and more months of silence yet again. Then they were the ones to come crawling back to me for help. Not long ago, I bought myself a used Nintendo Switch. Though I could only afford one game for it at the moment, which is Mario Kart. My mom came by on a Saturday and asked me to watch my two youngest siblings for a while. She basically pushed them in the door at me and ran. I was stuck with these two rowdy kids all day in my tiny apartment. My mom didn't come back until after 9 p.m. That was only because I called her and made her come get the kids. She really didn't like that I cut her fun time short. I said that unless she wanted to pay me, I wasn't going to be watching my siblings all day anymore. Next time, I won't even open the door and I'll call the cops if she just leaves them outside. The next morning I realized I couldn't find my Switch anywhere, so I called my parents and like I thought, one of my siblings took it. I said I was coming over to get it right away, but my mom said it could wait because my youngest sibling was gaming on it. Apparently, she didn't have the heart to take it away. I said it was taken without my permission, so I will be taking it back. I got on my bike and rode there immediately. When I arrived, my sibling was crying because the Switch's battery had gone dead and they didn't have the charger. I told them to give it back, but my dad took it and said I can have it back when I agree to start helping out with my siblings more. I told him if that's how he wanted to play this, I'd get the police involved. And no, I was not bluffing. He dug his heels in and insisted I wouldn't do it. Until I pulled my phone out and started dialing. My mom yelled wait. And hurriedly took my Switch back from my dad. He called her a traitor and demanded she return it to him instead of me, but she said it wasn't worth having the police called on them. Before leaving I told them if this ever happens again, I'd be calling the police first, and if they want a Switch for my siblings so bad, they can get their own. My dad yelled that I can't disrespect him like that. I countered that even though I'm an adult, he's not bothered to ever show an ounce of respect to me and I'd had enough. Then I walked out with him yelling at me to come back and face him. Right now it's back to silence from them. My mom texted me once begging me to still watch my siblings. I said that if she wanted me to babysit so badly, she could pay me and I'd only take the money in advance because I'm not doing it for free anymore. Especially after they stole from me and tried to keep from returning my property. They don't own me, I'm an adult with my own place and my own life. They can either get used to it or get lost. It's been over a week since the text conversation and none of them have as of yet talked to me again, which is fine. They can deal with their own messes.
Am I the a-hole for rejecting my girlfriend's proposal because it wasn't dramatic? My significant other of 5 years knows I'm all about big milestone events. I'm the type of girl that dreamt about her wedding for days when she was little, the type of girl that tried designing her own quinceañera dress because she wanted every single detail perfect. Some call me crazy because it's the family, friends, and stories that matter, right? Wrong. I'm not superficial or materialistic, but it's important for me to create moments in places that you're never going to forget. As I said, my girlfriend knows that, and we've talked about marriage, we've talked about what our future would look like, and she doesn't really care about this in the way I do, but she says yes to everything because she knows it makes me happy. I knew the day of the proposal was coming. I have this sixth sense where I know if something is happening or if a big change is coming. I was going crazy, making my nails, doing my hair, and buying cute clothes just in case. Then it happened, and she proposed, in our bedroom. We were cuddling and watching my favorite show. She told me she wanted to ask me something and just did it. I laughed because I thought it was a joke and just said something like, "Yeah, like you'll propose to me in our bedroom," and she grabbed a pink box from the nightstand and showed me a ring. I couldn't say anything at that moment, so she asked again and I just watched her. I asked her if she was serious and she told me that she was and that she wanted to spend her whole life with me. I quickly stood up and she noticed that I wasn't happy because she quickly asked, "You are going to say yes, right?" Of course I wanted to say yes, but I looked around our room, saw a McDonald's bag because we just had it for dinner, our dog's toys on the floor, the laundry basket, and I realized, yeah, no, this wasn't how I imagined my dream proposal. "Are you really proposing to me in our bedroom?" I asked. I noticed how nervous she started to get, talking about how this is our comfort place and about how safe we feel here when we are together and poop like that. I said no, this wasn't how I dreamed it would be, so I cannot accept you here. I knew she wanted to cry but she tried to hold it, and she just stood up and left the bedroom. I said that we should talk about this but she just left, and I heard her grabbing her keys and leaving the house. I think she is at her mom's house, and she's not texting me back nor answering my calls.
Cheat on me and brag to your friends? Enjoy deportation. I met this girl, 22 at the time, while I 30 meters at the time, was working in a national park, and she was a housekeeper on a work visa. We instantly hit it off, and within a month we were in a relationship. We even had a solid long-distance arrangement, where we would visit each other on recreational visas in our respective off-seasons. I'd spend a few months in Romania or meet her at some vacation destination, then she'd spend a few months in the States. This went on for about 2 years, and eventually the conversation came up with her family about possibly moving her to the States permanently. Romania never really recovered from the Ceausescu regime, and political/economic corruption makes life pretty unpleasant for a lot of people. Her marrying and moving to the US meant that her mom wouldn't have to worry about her daughter having a good life. I arranged for sponsorship, and proposed to her. It seemed like my dreams were coming true. Then, about a month after she's all settled in, I get a message from her best friend back home. What followed were a year's worth of screenshots wherein she bragged about conning me into paying for her residency, while she cheated on me with 8 different men. In her friend's words, "You are a good man and you don't deserve this." So, over the following 2 weeks, I reported her to ICE and Homeland Security for a conversation her brother and I had over a bottle at one point. He bragged about how he had done time in prison for smuggling weapons to Turkish terrorists, and how she had been his lookout on several occasions. As you might imagine, in the War on Terror days, this was not taken lightly. She was immediately arrested and deported, and put on a permanent no-entry terror watch list. Want to take advantage of me and cheat? Have fun never being able to come back to the States. Teachers of Reddit, have you ever had a crush on a student? What happened? I wouldn't say that I ever had a crush, but there are definitely girls that are really attractive and likable. I had a lot of girls, and even a few boys who seemed to have crushes on me, but it doesn't go anywhere, because I wouldn't cross that line. I had one girl walk up to me and say, "I'm a holla at you at the end of the year," and then proceed to bite her lip in a very suggestive way. I didn't even know who the hell that girl was. I had another girl who I absolutely adored come see me on the last day. I was leaving the school, but she was not in dress code at all. She was wearing 2 thin tank tops and the tiniest shorts I've ever seen. It was definitely not dress code approved, but since it was the last day she got away with it. She kept hugging me goodbye and hanging all over me, and I have to admit that I was getting a bit turned on by it. She actually followed me out to my car to say goodbye, and when we parted for the last time there was this agonizing moment of awkwardness where it seemed like she was waiting for me to give her a kiss or something. One time in the cafeteria, after I had just started teaching, I saw this beautiful teacher wearing a tight-fitting wrap dress watching over the lunch line. She looked absolutely poured into that dress, so I had to go talk to her. I went up, introduced myself, and we started talking. We flirted a bit while we talked, and things seemed to be going good, because she initiated an arm squeeze on me when I made a joke. We parted after a little bit, and she walked off and sat down at one of the tables with the students. I thought to myself, that's cool, she eats with her students. I'm doing my lunch duty thing, which largely involves standing around, and every once in a while I look over at the hot teacher and we exchange glances and smiles. At this point I figure that I need to find out where her room is so I can drop by later and talk her up some more. I figure I can just tell her I'm going to make copies, and see if she needs anything run off while I'm at it. I'm in the middle of talking with one of my students, so I ask them, "What is that lady over there in the dress teach and where is her room at?" My student simply replies back, "She's in my French class, but I don't know her." At that point it clicks in my head that she's a student, and worse, that I've been flirting with a student throughout lunch. Mortified, I fled the cafeteria and hid in my room. I had another lunch duty the next day, but I couldn't even bring myself to go to it, because I was so embarrassed. You want to know where I am at all times? Your wish is my command. I've been lurking on this sub for a hot minute, and I saw a post that reminded me of my own MC story. Sorry for any formatting issues since I am on mobile. This happened about 8 years ago, 1 year into just my first job, paid internship/clerking gig. The firm that I worked for had a part-time program for law students so they could work and gain experience while in school, very common in my country. I loved my job. I was very grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow, and I really enjoyed the work I performed. The thing was, I had classes both in the morning and the afternoon. Night in my school was at a different side of the city, about 8 miles away, that could turn into hours of traffic during rush hour in a city with 8 million inhabitants. So my days looked pretty hectic, as something like this: 5:30 to 7 o'clock, get ready and drive to school. 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, Class, 9 o'clock to 10:00-ish, drive to work, 10:00-ish 17:00, work, 1700 hours to 1800 hours, drive to school, 1800 hours to 2200 hours, classes. Then I would try to study for 1 hour after class, and I would often eat while driving. During my first year in the program I had more than proved myself and earned my place. I was that 19, 20-year-old idiot, type A overachiever that knew no boundaries. I had worked weekends, pulled all-nighters, literally I would leave school at 10 p.m. and go back to work, worked full-time in the summers without more pay, anything I had to do to keep the associates happy so they'd keep teaching me. As I was wrapping my first anniversary there, the perfect storm of awful rolled around. On the academic front I started a new semester and twice a week in the mornings I had a teacher who was awesome but would finish class 20 to 30 minutes late. On the work front, a new partner joined the firm, let's call him Mr. Jerk, for short, and kind of took over as unofficial managing partner. He was the typical old-fashioned lawyer that should be extinct by now. He could barely use Microsoft Word to type a contract and would pass out at the sight of an Excel sheet. He had this weird obsession with punctuality while simultaneously being late to everything. Plus he moronically believed that by having a bunch of people warming up chairs he would magically make money, so instead of investing time on client development he would just spend endless time and effort on bullying everyone around the office. To make matters worse, since other people spoke highly of me, he decided to pay special attention to me. Unsurprisingly, shortly after Jerk joined the firm started struggling. Now he could have tried to get new clients, send quotes by the deadline and show up to meetings on time. But no. Of course the firm was doing poorly because us clerks did not spend enough time warming up the chairs. So he became obsessed with us getting there by 10 a.m., especially me. The issue was that I could not get there by 10 because my teacher finished class late and there was no way I could drive across the city in rush hour in 30 minutes. So Jerk called a meeting with all the clerks and yelled at me in front of everyone because I was always late, more like 2x a week, but whatever. The fact that I had gotten permission to form the program committee did not matter. The fact that I was working 6 or 7 hours every day while I only had to work 5 did not matter. The fact that I would work weekends and late nights did not matter. I tried to explain but he'll keep yelling at me and would not let me talk. Having had enough I left the conference room straight into the office of every member of the clerk program committee, one junior associate, one SR associate and one partner, to say the same speech. I am late because I have class. I have proven my commitment to the firm, but my education is important too. If 30 minutes late twice a week is too big of an issue, feel free to fire me, but I am not leaving class early. Then went to my desk to do my work. I guess the committee informed other partners and word got around of what was going on. Small firm, because as I was getting ready to leave for school, Jerk came fuming to my desk and told me, I know you are lying from now on. I want to know where you are at all times, and if I catch that you are slacking off or lying, you are fired and I will make sure no one will ever hire you. So cue malicious compliance. The next day I woke up extra early 5 a.m. sharp, took a time-stamped photo and sent it to both his email and phone, since I could not risk him not getting it and him not knowing where I was. I sent a time-stamped photo every 5 minutes captioning what I was doing like it was my own personal social media platform of one follower. The cherry on top was that my teacher had worked with Jerk in the past and obviously did not like him very much, so he let me take photos during the class and diligently send them to Jerk. I even went as far as taking a photo of the toilet door with the text peeing, and then it at the toilet flushing all done. While driving, since traffic was really slow, I would send a photo and include how much I had moved during that time. Sometimes it was something absurd like 100 feet. As soon as I sent a photo of me at my desk, he shows up saying that he got the point and I could stop. A couple weeks later he simply stopped bugging people and started working from home or locking himself up in his office. My guess is I was not the only one to complain, and the other partner realized how dangerous he could be for the firm and asked him to back off. Managers, what's the fastest you've had a new hire get fired? I was the manager at a diesel truck shop in college. My boss hired a mechanic who was supposed to have all his own tools. Dude shows up with a toolbox the size of a lunchbox on his start day. He made up some story about slowly bringing his tools over every day because his car was small. Whatever. I put him on an easy job replacing a thermostat on a medium-duty pickup truck. The book time on this job was like an hour. My day has gotten busy and I realize that like 3 hours have passed and the homeboy hasn't even come in to even grab the new thermostat for me yet. So I went out to check on him and couldn't believe what I was seeing. The intake was off, the radiator was removed, all the coolant hoses were removed and sitting in a cardboard box. There was coolant and oil all over the floor. It was totally insane. The mechanic had taken some substances apparently and was on a different planet, rolling around under the truck. No reason to be doing this whatsoever to replace the thermostat on this truck. His phone was blasting the Redneck Kings of Comedy and he was covered in sunflower seed shells that he had spit all over himself. I turned off his phone and asked him what the F was going on. And he started crying, saying he couldn't figure out where the damn thermostat was. I told him to go the F home. It took one of my other mechanics like 2 hours to undo all the destruction he had done, and we had to put all new fluids in the truck because this dodo drained them all out into dirty pans / all over the floor in all of 30 minutes to replace the thermostat and get the truck back to the customer. My boss had hired this idiot, so I told him to call and fire him. The next day, he showed up to collect his paycheck for 3 hours of destruction and his lunchbox filled with tools. He made apologies, stole our yard dog that had lived at the shop for years, and we never saw him again. At what age did you move away from your parents and how did they react / what did they say? I moved out of my parents' house when I turned 19. It wasn't an easy decision for me, as my family is really close-knit and I love spending time with them, but I knew that I needed to be independent and make my own way in the world. My parents were pretty understanding about it, but I could tell that they were sad to see me go. My mom kept asking me if I was going to be okay on my own, and my dad gave me a stern lecture about responsibility and making good choices. I rolled my eyes at the time, But looking back, I appreciate their concern. Living on my own was a rude awakening for me. Suddenly, I was responsible for paying rent, buying groceries, and taking care of myself. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be, especially since I was also going to college at the same time. But I managed to make it work. I found a job at a local coffee shop, which helped me pay my bills, and I made some friends at school who were also living on their own, so we could commiserate and support each other. Of course, there were some tough moments, like the time my car broke down and I had to figure out how to pay for repairs I couldn't afford, or the time I got really sick and had to drag myself to the doctor's office without my mom there to take care of me. But I kept pushing forward, and eventually, things started to fall into place. I got a raise at work, I aced a difficult midterm, and I started to feel like I could really handle this whole living on my own thing. But then, something happened that changed everything. I was using my computer one night and I stumbled across a folder that I had no memory of making. I opened it up and saw that it was filled with explicit and provocative videos that I had no recollection of making. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized that someone had hacked into my computer and stolen them. I didn't know what to do. I felt violated and exposed. And worst of all, I knew that the videos would ruin any chance I had of getting a decent job or even a future relationship. I had to find out who was behind the hack. I started to dig around and eventually, I uncovered the truth. It was someone that I had trusted completely. Someone that I had let into my life and now they had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I was furious and I knew that I had to take action. But I was also scared. I didn't know what would happen if I confronted them. Would they get angry and lash out? Would they try to hurt me? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't just let this go. I needed to reclaim my life and my dignity. So I took a deep breath and I made my move. I sent a message to the person who had hacked me, demanding an apology and restitution. I was prepared for the worst, but I was surprised by what happened next. Instead of getting angry, they apologized profusely and promised to make it right. Now, I'm left with a difficult decision. Do I accept their apology and move on? Or do I take further action and make sure that they never hurt anyone else again? I'm still not sure what to do. But I know that I can't let this go. I need to take action and reclaim my life and my dignity.
Today I effed up. My neighbors can hear me and my wife having sex. About 2 hours ago, me, male 30, and my wife, female 29, happily married for almost 3 years now. My wife and I were having a good time. Our sex lives have improved recently, trying new things, etc. After we did the deed, my wife gets a text from our neighbor. We live in the middle of terraced housing, so have neighbors both sides, that they can hear us going at it, and this is not the first occasion they've heard. We are now both really embarrassed and no idea how to play it out next time we see them. We do get one well, they are a couple about 3 years younger than us, so just thinking not to discuss it and just carry on as normal? On the other hand, we have never heard either of our neighbors doing the deed. The other side have a young baby, about 2 months old, and as mentioned before, our neighbors are a young couple. Assuming we have thin walls, are they just not having good sex or none at all?
To police officers, how are you feeling seeing how the situation was handled in Texas? This department has now created a situation where parents will show up to a future incident armed and not likely to take direction from officers on the scene. Pretty fucking angry. I am retired now but taught active shooter response for over 10 years. Uvalde ISD chief should resign and turn in his credentials and get a job digging ditches. Thank goodness Bordak took the initiative, even if they waited and listened to a rondo for 30 minutes. Seething. I was already pretty pissed when I found out about it, but finding out the cops went in to save their kids and they proceeded to let the shotter run around for an hour because they quote were scared they'd get shot has ticked me the fuck off. I hope every single of them is fired, but knowing Texas, they won't get there, just desserts. In Britain there was an attacker with a machete on London Bridge and our unarmed police officers ran towards him with only pepper spray and batons, literally hitting sticks. In fact, one was an off-duty transport police officer with no gear at all. I can't fathom the slowness of the response. I pretended to be a famous influencer on social media and got freebies from major brands. Posting travel photos on Instagram is my passion. There is something about capturing beautiful destinations and sharing them with the world that brings me so much joy. But I'll be honest, I sometimes envy those travel influencers who seem to be living the dream. They get to travel to incredible places, stay in luxurious hotels, and eat at the best restaurants, all for free. So one day, while scrolling through Instagram and feeling a bit jealous of these influencers, I got an idea. What if I pretended to be a famous influencer on social media and got freebies from major brands? It seemed like a crazy idea at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. After all, I already had a decent following on Instagram, and my travel photos were pretty good. Plus, I had some experience working with brands in the past, so I knew how to pitch myself. So I decided to give it a shot. The first step was to create a persona for myself. I didn't want to completely make up a new identity, so I decided to use my own name and just enhance certain aspects of my life. I changed my bio to say that I was a travel guru and lifestyle expert, and I started posting more frequently about my travels. I also made sure to use lots of hashtags like #blessed and #wanderlust to attract more attention. And it worked. Within a few weeks, my following started to grow steadily. People were commenting on my photos and asking for travel tips. It was an amazing feeling knowing that people were actually interested in what I had to say. The next step was to start reaching out to brands. I knew that in order to get their attention, I would have to be strategic about my approach. So instead of just sending them a generic email or DM, I decided to do some research on each brand and tailor my pitches to their specific needs. I would find out who the brand's social media manager was, and then I would send them a personalized message explaining why I love their products and why I thought we would be a good fit. I also made sure to include some of my best travel photos in the pitch to show them what I was capable of. And it worked. Before I knew it, I was getting responses from brands left and right. They were sending me free products and inviting me on press trips. It was like a dream come true. But here's the thing, I wasn't actually going on these press trips. Instead, I would use the photos that the brands sent me and post them on my Instagram as if I had been there myself. I would write captions about how amazing the trip was and how grateful I was for the opportunity. And my followers ate it up. They would comment on my photos saying how jealous they were and asking for more details about the trip. It was crazy how easily they believed me. One day, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across a post from one of my favorite travel influencers. She had just gotten back from a press trip to Bali, and she was sharing all of her amazing photos from the trip. As I looked through her photos, something caught my eye. One of the photos looked familiar. In fact, it looked exactly like one of the photos that a brand had sent me for a press trip to Bali. It turns out, the brand had used the same location for both trips, and they had accidentally sent me a photo from the influencer's trip instead of my own. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, I started to wonder if maybe this wasn't just a coincidence. So I decided to do some more digging. I went back through all of the photos that brands had sent me over the past few months, and I compared them to the photos that influencers had posted. And what I found was shocking. Almost every single one of the photos that brands had sent me was an exact copy of a photo that an influencer had already posted. It turns out, the brands were using the same locations, props, and even models for their press trips. They were just sending different influencers on the trips and then giving them the same photos to post. It was all just smoke and mirrors. The influencers weren't actually traveling to these amazing destinations, they were just pretending to. And the brands were in on it too. They were using these fake trips to promote their products and create a sense of FOMO among their followers. It was all just a big scam. And here I was, unknowingly participating in it. I felt like such a fool. I had spent so much time and energy building up my following and working with these brands, only to find out that it was all based on a lie. I felt dirty and used. I wanted to come clean and tell my followers the truth, but I knew that would mean losing everything, my following, my partnerships, everything. So I decided to keep quiet and continue playing along. But deep down, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. And eventually, it started to eat away at me. I couldn't sleep at night knowing that I was lying to thousands of people every day. So I made a decision, I was going to expose the truth. I started by reaching out to some of the other influencers who had been on these fake press trips. I told them what I had discovered and asked if they would be unaliving to speak out as well. To my surprise, many of them agreed. We started sharing our stories on social media, exposing the brands for their deceptive practices. And the response was overwhelming. People were shocked and outraged. They couldn't believe that they had been lied to for so long. And they wanted justice. The story quickly went viral, and major news outlets started picking it up. The brands tried to do damage control, but it was too late. Their reputations were ruined, and their followers were abandoning them in droves. It was a satisfying feeling knowing that we had brought them down. But it wasn't enough. I still felt guilty for what I had done. I knew that I had played a part in deceiving people, and I needed to make it right. So I reached out to my followers and apologized for my actions. I told them the whole truth, how I had pretended to be a famous influencer and gotten freebies from major brands. I didn't make any excuses or try to justify what I had done. I just took full responsibility for my actions and promised to do better in the future. And you know what? My followers forgave me. They understood that I had made a mistake, but they believed that I could learn from it and grow as a person. They saw the authenticity in my apology, and they respected me for it. And that's when I realized something: being a successful influencer isn't about the number of followers you have or the free stuff you get. It's about being true to yourself and your audience. It's about using your platform to inspire and empower others, not deceive them. And that's exactly what I'm going to do from now on.
Guys, what made you realize, this girl is definitely not into me? We flirted for several weeks, hung out every day, I kept feeling a closer and closer connection, but due to circumstances I could not control, we were never alone enough together for me to test it. Had some friends plan a camping trip and I invited her and she said yes. I even specifically told her there's gonna be 2 couples there, so we're gonna be in a tent, just the 2 of us. She said yeah, she knows. Get to the trip, we have a few drinks and I asked her if she wants to take a walk with me to look at stars. I get it, it's corny. Shut up. Once we're a little away from everyone I tell her how much I like her and attempt to go in for a kiss. Nope, sorry, name, am not what you're looking for, shattered me, utterly gutted. Asked her to senior prom. She said yes, but when we got there she ditched me to hang out with another guy she liked. Wasn't too bad though, cause I danced with another girl who I got along better with.
What's the most disrespectful thing a guest ever did in your home? When I was in my late teens, maybe 19, my dad invited his brother and his new mistress turned wife and her 2 brats to our house. We had 2 cats, but realistically they were my cats because I spent the most time with them, loved them, and took care of them. I didn't really fit into the conversation, being so young, so I hung in the living room while the older adults were in the kitchen. My uncle's new wife, I can't bring myself to call her aunt. Kids were going nuts over my cats. They were 2 boys, 9 and 7, both with behavioral problems. They could not control themselves at all. They did not have manners or any regard for things that weren't theirs. So I resigned myself to watching them, because I didn't trust the 2 little shits around my cats, and their mom and my uncle sure weren't keeping an eye on them. I even made sure to gently warn them, something along the lines of be nice and gentle, or you'll spook them. So these brats drug all the cat toys I had out and start going crazy trying to get reactions out of my cats. Most cats don't appreciate a lot of upfront energy like that, they're not like dogs, so my cats mostly just stared in bewilderment or ignored them. Then I watched one of these little shits reach out and slap my tortoiseshell cat across the head to get her to look at him. It was the 9-year-old, who damn well knew better for sure, and he didn't hold back in his swing. My poor girl was bowled over by it. I was pissed AF. I dragged him up off the floor and told him to leave my cats alone, then effectively banished him and his brother to the kitchen for their lousy guardians to watch them. He's lucky I didn't smack him. I've never hit a kid, but that would be the thing that drove me to it. After that I made it clear to his parents that their kids weren't welcome at the house anymore. My mom and dad, who also weren't fans of the less than behaved brats, didn't dissuade me. A month later, the 9-year-old pulled the same harassment towards my grandmother's 2 cats. Her orange tabby, a sweet little shy girl who was nervous around almost everyone, was terrified out of her mind because the 9-year-old was chasing her around my grandparents' house. Room to room, he chased her out of all her normal hiding spots that she retreated to when she was overwhelmed. I've never seen that cat as scared as she was. So naturally, I stepped in because my grandmother was too nice to tell her new daughter-in-law's kids to settle the F down. He played outside after that. To me, there's just nothing more disrespectful than mistreating the pets of your host. Animal abuse in any form is disgusting, but they're a part of the family, they should be treated as such, not like living breathing toys or entertainment to throw and break. Ugh, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done while intoxicated? I was 16 and I was sneaking back up to bed after smoking all night when I got the munchies real bad. I took a detour to the kitchen and I started rifling around, but I was too paranoid to turn on the lights, so I really couldn't see anything. I got a craving for fruit, so I went over to the fruit bowl and I saw the biggest orange I've ever seen. I'm talking massive. This thing was the size of a softball if not bigger, so I was all over it. I took it up to my room, again too afraid to turn on the lights, so I just started peeling it blindly. I was really struggling and I even remember stopping to giggle at how I was so stupidly high I couldn't even peel an orange. Fast forward a bit and I finally took the first hard-earned bite and it was just awful. Sour and bitter and everything bad all at once. You know that feeling when you bite into something and it's just not at all what you expected? It's a special kind of disappointment. But instead of just throwing it away and going to sleep, I fought on. I had to eat the orange. I was forcing down slice after slice, bite after bite, all the while shaming myself for not appreciating how delicious it truly was. I had convinced myself that there was nothing wrong with the orange, rather, the problem was with me. My taste buds had been warped by years of exposure to processed sugar and corn syrup and other synthetic treats. How far had I drifted from what Mother Nature intended? Undoubtedly some of my ancestors went their entire lives without tasting something as delicious as an orange. This was a cathartic moment for me. I deserved this suffering. It was the first step on the road to recovery. Eventually I finished and passed out. First thing the next morning I saw my mom at the kitchen table and, still trying to convince myself, I said, "Mom, those oranges are so big. And so good. Where did you get them?" And she looked at me like I was special and said, "Sweetie, those are grapefruits."
My roommate poisoned me and refuses to pay my medical bills. I have asked plenty of people in real life about this situation, and everyone thinks I'm in the wrong, so I'm hoping to get more perspective by posting about it. I'm a 19-year-old college student, and I live in a shared apartment with 3 other girls. Until this issue, things have gone smoothly, and I got along with almost everyone in the apartment. Except for Julie. Frankly, I think the girl is a giant loser. Her major is on the easier side, and I feel like she spends the least amount of time on academics than anyone in the house. She's also on the heavier side and spends most of her time smoking WD in her room with her other loser friends. To be fair, she's always been pretty nice to me, and she does clean up after herself in the shared spaces. I just don't see why she can't get her life together and do more with her time. Anyway, I had already disliked her before this, but now I can't stand the girl after what she did to me. The other morning I woke up to a gross unfamiliar smell. I opened my door to see Julie baking in the kitchen. I figured she was just a SHT baker and slammed my door and didn't come out of my room until I heard her leave. When I finally came out into the empty kitchen, I saw a big tray of fresh brownies cooling on the table. The one nice thing about Julie was that she shared her food often, and it wasn't unusual for her to leave extras of whatever she was cooking or baking that week for me and the other roommates to eat. She usually left a note next to the dishes and sent out a text in our roommate group chat saying food was available to anyone. So even though there were no notes or text, I figured it would be okay if I had a single brownie. They smelled so good, and I just couldn't resist it. When I put it in my mouth, it was good but had a strange aftertaste. I had class in an hour, so I went back to my room to work on homework. As I started leaving for class, I realized I was feeling sort of weird, and by the time I sat down in class, I knew something was wrong. I have never done substances, so I had no idea what I was feeling. First, my eyes started to feel warm. Then I felt extremely lightheaded and I was having trouble keeping my eyes open. My tongue felt dry, and a big wave of nausea fell over me right there in class. I thought I was dying. I literally thought I was about to puke and pass out right there in front of the entire class. I ended up running out and calling myself an ambulance. The EMTs arrived and asked about my symptoms. They asked me if I had taken anything that day, and I told them no. I was taken to the emergency room, and I ended up falling asleep in my hospital bed as they ran tests on me. When I woke up a few hours later, my parents were there and were asking me why the hospital had found Marie Anna in my system. They were pissed at me, and I was confused until I remembered the goddamn brownies. Now that I was sober, I could put the pieces together, and I called Julie angrily. I asked her if the brownies she had made earlier had substances in them, and she said yes, and that she had only left them out to cool, not share. I yelled at her for not being clear about that, and I called her an idiot for leaving illegal substances out in the open like that. I told her she was going to pay for my hospital bills since she had basically doctor-ged me with her irresponsibility. Julie had the nerve to laugh at me over the phone, and I hung up on her since I was only getting more pissed off. I told my parents what happened. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore as I spilled everything to them, but luckily they understood. My dad said we could look into lawyers if Julie kept refusing to pay my medical bills, and said I did nothing wrong. After I left the hospital, I spoke about the incident with a couple of my friends, and they all said I was wrong for eating the brownies without asking. I'm shocked that my parents are the only ones on my side, but I really don't care what anyone says. I am for sure suing Julie if she doesn't cough up the money for my ambulance bill, and no one can convince me not to. She had to learn her lesson one way or another, and this is what she gets for being a substance-addicted loser. My husband is trying to force me to get rid of my baby, and it's not the first time. Please help. I'm facing a tough situation and need advice. My husband did something that has left me feeling lost. He convinced me to have baby garbage when we found out our first baby was a boy, and now he's saying we should do the same for our second child after learning the gender. At the start of our relationship, my husband seemed excited about becoming a dad. He talked about how ready he was for fatherhood, and I could see his happiness when I got pregnant. But things changed when we found out the first baby's gender. He became distant and cold, saying we should focus on our careers and that being parents could wait. I didn't want to lose him, so I agreed to the baby garbage. Recently, I got pregnant again, and we were both thrilled until we found out it's another boy. My husband's response was to suggest another baby garbage, claiming he's not ready again. During a heated argument, he confessed that he doesn't want boys because he thinks they are morally and physically degenerated and inferior in every single way. I'm shocked and don't know how to handle this. I realize that my husband hates men and actively discriminates against them. He has hurt men physically before, always in defense of women. He has a business with an all-female team and says he hires based on merit, but I'm starting to doubt that. He even talked about us moving to a farm in the middle of nowhere so he doesn't have to see another man again. I'm torn between my love for my husband, who is everything I want in the world except for this one problem, and the life of my son. My husband has given me an ultimatum: choose him or the baby. I feel trapped and don't see any other options. I need help and guidance on what to do in this tough situation.
I put a baby mouse out of its misery when I was a teenager. Well, that's how I thought of it anyway. I used to go on these really long walks by myself, and one day on the railing of a bridge I saw something tiny that I thought was dead. But it wasn't. Maybe I should have left it. I didn't even know what I should do with it. But I picked it up and brought it home. Nobody was home that I remember. I sent a friend a photo of it online. I don't know how, but we both agreed that it wasn't going to live. Looking back, it could have been dehydrated as it was a hot summer day and it could hardly move. I didn't know any resources, and my parents wouldn't have helped me save him by buying anything I could use to care for him. I was a stupid kid, and I felt so bad for the mouse because it couldn't even walk or fend for itself. It's so hard for me to even say it. I tried to drown the mouse because I thought that was an easy way out. I didn't know that took time or wasn't quick. I was dumb. I think I ended up cutting its throat. I placed it in a stream. But this haunts me. Why did I even pick it up? What did I think I was going to do? Why did I think I should intervene like that? What the duck was wrong with me? If this happened to me today, I would be looking for a professional. I would make phone calls. Anything. I'd even buy my own syringes to feed it if I had to. I wouldn't let it go. I remember feeling terrible when I did it, but like I genuinely had to, even though I probably didn't. I didn't feel good afterward.
Today I effed up by meeting my gross online boyfriend in person for the first time. I, 23F, flew out to meet him, 25M, for the first time ever last week. We've dated each other for 6 months and I seriously thought he was the love of my life, even though we were long distance. He even bought me a plane ticket to travel to his country. I was so nervous. When I landed, I looked for a toilet because I wanted to brush my teeth and freshen myself. I thought he'd do the same, and when I finally saw him waiting for me at the entrance, I was over the moon. We hugged and we kissed, and I noticed his breath smelled bad and he had a weird body odor. I thought no big deal, maybe he waited for a long time and it will be better after he showers. It did not get better. Even after showering, he has a weird smell. I don't know if it is just his natural scent or if he did not use enough soap, but even after I told him that he still smelled a little after showering, it didn't get any better. But I thought I love him so much I can get over it. So I tried to enjoy our week together, but soon it turned out he didn't like talking, at all. I should have noticed when we were voice chatting that we never talked about anything personal, just about the game we were playing, lol. The whole time I was there he was on his phone 90% of the time, and even when I told him stories about my life all he said was okay or cool. When I asked him questions about his life he answered them with a short sentence and didn't even ask in return. His apartment was very messy as well. There was old underwear lying around, and the whole time I was there he never once did the dishes. I did them after a few days because it was getting nasty. By the end of the week, it became apparent that I just wanted to get home and was glad to get away from him, and I just thought it would be fair to tell him it wouldn't work out for me, which resulted in him breaking down and crying for a few hours and telling me I was the love of his life and he never loved anyone like he loved me, which was so weird because we didn't even talk at all. I don't know how he can feel that strongly. I feel like we barely know each other. We were like strangers. Anyway, I'm back home now, and while maybe I could have noticed some things while we were never met, like that he's not a big talker, some things like the smell and his messiness only became apparent during the visit, so my advice to anyone here is meet as soon as possible to get to know the real person and find out if you are compatible in real life. I'm just so glad I didn't waste years. Even after 6 months, it was such a big disappointment. But one thing's for damn sure, I will not be washing any grown man's dishes again for as long as I live.
My husband is leaving me for someone else. I'm 9 weeks pregnant. He told me 3 days ago that he's been carrying on with her and he's going to divorce me for her. I'm 9 weeks pregnant. He told me he'll pay whatever maintenance the court sets and he is sorry he didn't do it before I got pregnant. One of my colleagues has arranged an appointment with a solicitor for me. I have a job as a phlebotomist, a flat, and my colleagues and family are lovely. I know it will be okay even if it doesn't feel like it right now, though I am still in shock. Update: our flat was a leasehold, so I couldn't just change the locks or bar my husband from the flat because it was in both our names. However, he agreed to relinquish and the landlord agreed to keep me on as a tenant with a new agreement solely in my name. I'm employed, so there was no issue with me affording the flat on my own. I did have questions about why I wanted to stay in the place I used to live with my husband. The flat is in a safe area and near my job and my family, and with being pregnant on top of that, the last thing on my mind is finding another flat. Since I'm employed and earn roughly the same as my husband, spousal support would not have been ordered. We have divided up and closed our bank accounts, and my husband has collected his things from our flat. Our solicitors helped us in settling things and making it legally binding. My husband agreed in writing that he will pay whatever child maintenance he is ordered to and that he does not want custody or to be part of our child's life, and all sole decision making will be left to me. My solicitor says he could change his mind in the future, but his written statements and lack of interest will work against him, especially since he also has a solicitor to advise him. I asked about removing his rights as a father, but unless he does something such as abuse or I find another partner to step in, the legal system will not just remove them. Also, removing them would affect my ability to collect maintenance from him. The woman he was carrying on with is also married, but they have no children. It's my understanding that as soon as the divorces are final, the two of them plan to settle in Spain, where my husband's father retired. That's what his solicitor said anyways. Everything is legally settled, so I am just waiting for the divorce to become final because that takes time. Tomorrow I will be 17 weeks pregnant. Both the baby and I are healthy, and my family, my friends and my colleagues have been lovely and supportive. I also appreciate the many lovely comments and messages I received here.
How did you get over your spouse's death? A dating app turned out to be more than just a platform for potential romantic connections. It became my lifeline. As a single mother navigating the challenges of life, I found myself caught in the whirlwind of responsibilities and emotional exhaustion. The demands of parenthood often left little room for personal connections, and loneliness began to take its toll. One day, after some gentle encouragement from a friend, I decided to dip my toes into the world of dating apps. It wasn't about finding a romantic partner right away. It was about seeking companionship, someone to share a laugh with, or simply engage in a meaningful conversation. As I swiped through profiles and exchanged messages, I stumbled upon individuals whose stories resonated with mine. Single parents who understood the struggles, empathetic souls who had faced their own challenges. These were the connections that went beyond the conventional notions of dating. Among the myriad conversations, I met someone who would become a true friend and, eventually, a lifeline. We shared our triumphs, our heartaches, and the everyday victories of parenting. It was a connection that transcended the virtual realm and provided the support I desperately needed. What started as a few exchanged messages soon turned into phone calls and, eventually, in-person meetups. Our friendship grew stronger, and this newfound support system became an anchor in the storm of single parenthood. Through the trials of life, my dating app friend became more than just a companion. They offered a helping hand when I needed it most, whether it was watching the kids during a hectic day or providing a listening ear during challenging times. The support was reciprocal, and we became each other's pillars of strength. As life moved forward, the unexpected friendship blossomed into something beautiful. It wasn't just about finding a partner, it was about building a family of choice, a network of support that extended beyond the boundaries of traditional relationships.
I broke up with my girlfriend mid-climax. We had been together for just over 3 years, and I thought we had a healthy relationship. We were close, honest with each other, and enjoyed each other's company. While I was aware that my girlfriend had always been a bit secretive, I never saw it as a cause for concern. That is, until one fateful day. It all began with a suspicious text message that caught my eye. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I took a peek at her phone. What I found was shocking and heartbreaking, clear evidence that she had been cheating. What hurt me even more was that she had been incredibly open with someone else about her personal preferences in the bedroom, describing things that she never shared with me. She had even gone as far as to say that I wouldn't be able to fulfill her desires because I wasn't into certain interests, which I won't detail here. I was baffled by this, considering that I am not vanilla by any means and I'm more than happy to try new things, so I am stumped as to why she didn't bring this up with me and instead resorted to cheating. I spent the next few days torn and conflicted about what to do. Anger, sadness, and confusion overwhelmed me, and I finally settled on a plan that I now recognize may have been quite childish. After having a few drinks for confidence, I decided to talk to her in a way that was out of the ordinary. We started getting intimate and I intentionally began to do the very thing she described in those private messages. She was surprised, certainly, but in a positive way. She was enjoying herself more than usual, and I found myself torn as I watched her express her happiness so openly. A part of me almost backed out of my plan, but the wound was too fresh, and I pressed on. I led her on for a while, drawing out the moment, and making her plead for release. And then, at the very height of her joy, I leaned in and told her what I had discovered. In that moment, with words that were as cold as they were decisive, I ended our relationship. What is it like to have Mark Cuban as an investor in your startup from Shark Tank? I taped for the show Shark Tank and ultimately got a deal with Cuban. My episode never ended airing, which I believe was because we never closed the deal with Cuban. After we taped, his people got in contact with us and sent us line items of requirements and other information. The contract: he would own 20% of the company and pay $150,000. No salary for the founders, only yearly disbursements if anyone decides to sell shares. Cuban gets first rights to purchase them. If we decide to go for more funding, Cuban gets right to purchase 20% of raising. The $150,000 will be given to us as we need if we are on brink of bankruptcy or file. He gets first rights to buy our assets such as patents we had. We must update weekly on expenses and reports for them. If we want to expand, we must contact them for approval. Basically, his 20% share was giving him full control of the company. We didn't start the company and build it to $850,000 revenue in 3 years to work for someone. He isn't working and putting his sweat, blood, and tears to bust his ass. He is putting in $150,000 that is being dispersed in small allotments. 70% of deals on Shark Tank fall through after the episode is taped. Don't believe the BS you see. What do you regret finding out? My mother found out she had a lung disease and she had about 7 years to live. She just all of a sudden quit smoking. It wasn't caused by smoking, but quitting would extend her life. Several years later she just said, "Oh, I have this lung issue, but they don't really know what it comes from." She was very elusive because I'm a nurse and she didn't want me to research her disease and find out she was dying. The last year of her life she was on oxygen. I knew she was sick, but not that she was dying. Nobody did. I knew the time was near, but I thought I had a few more years. She ended up in the hospital, got pneumonia and died a few days later with me at her side. She knew I would be an absolute wreck if I knew for all those years, so she tried to protect me from that. As I sat beside her, when she was really sick, I knew she was worried about me. She was dying and worried about me. I told her through tears that it was okay to die. I could not get the words out completely. I just said, "You are really suffering, aren't you?" And she nodded yes. I said, "It's okay. I will be okay. It's okay too. It's okay. I'll be fine. It's okay too." I couldn't even say it. But she knew what I was saying. She just nodded yes. I got fired for accusing my boss of using ChatGPT. I, 27 male, am a creative director at a marketing agency. My boss, 32 male, I'll call him Vince, is the co-owner of our company. Vince has always been a bit insecure with his communication skills. For additional context, I have a strong background in copywriting and copy editing, so I know I sometimes make Vince feel even more self-conscious whenever we need to communicate in English. Despite this, Vince and I have a pretty friendly relationship for a boss and employee. We only have a 5-year age gap, and we'll joke around about personal stuff sometimes, like when I tease him for sleeping on the couch after working late and irritating his wife. Or when he gives me a hard time whenever I pick terrible gifts for my girlfriend. It's all in good fun. We've even hung out outside of work. Vince scored some courtside tickets to a basketball game last year and invited me along. So all this to say, we're friendly but still maintain professionalism. However, last month, Vince has obviously started using AI to write things like birthday messages, work anniversary greetings, congratulatory notes when someone lands a new client, etc. on our company Slack. I noticed the change immediately. He used to just write quick 5-word greetings, but suddenly they were these 10-sentence formal messages using words and phrases Vince would never actually use. Last Monday, we had a working lunch at my office to discuss the deck I had just completed for an upcoming client meeting. Then, as we were wrapping up, Vince asked me casually if I'd noticed him putting in more effort with his messages lately. And like an idiot, instead of just agreeing politely, I made some joke and said, "Oh yeah, looks like ChatGPT has been doing some heavy lifting lately." Vince immediately got defensive and started ranting about how dare I call him out. There's nothing wrong with using ChatGPT for work stuff, it's efficient and helps him communicate better in English, blah blah blah. I tried to backtrack and say I didn't mean any offense. I agree there's nothing wrong with using ChatGPT in moderation. I was just trying to give some friendly feedback that maybe he could use better prompts and customize the output a bit to sound more natural coming from him. But at that point, Vince was too pissed off, called me an a-hole, and stormed off. Of course, I didn't want the incident to damage our relationship long term. Vince had been an amazing mentor and friend to me. I'd hate for some dumb joke to ruin the mutual respect we have for each other. So, later that day, I just came to Vince's office and apologized. He simply smiled and said it was fine. However, the entire week, he had been giving me the cold shoulder. We only interacted when discussing work. I tried making jokes about other stuff, but he's not acknowledging them. Also, since then, he has gone back to his usual 5-word greetings. Edit, I got demoted and then fired shortly after for unknown reasons. My sister says I can't be in her wedding if I bring my boyfriend of 5 years. I met my boyfriend in college 7 years ago and we started dating 5 years ago. He is super close and loving with my family. She was there at my niece's births, baptisms, Christmas vacations, etc. We are extremely committed to each other for the long run, but don't want to get married until we are financially stable and both our careers are where we want them to be. My sister has been with her fiancé for 2 years and engaged for 6 months. My sister is the type of girl who has dreamed of getting married since she was a little girl. It didn't matter who proposed, she just wanted to be married. I have never cared if I got married or not. As long as I have a good career and a happy relationship, I'm fine. In the beginning of her relationship, she tricked me into going on a double date with her fiancé and his brother. She had said it was dinner with her and a friend and it was most definitely not. The brother kept making passes at me the whole time and I told him I had a boyfriend and the whole situation made me uncomfortable. At their engagement party, my boyfriend noticed that the brother wouldn't stop staring at me and we tried our best to avoid him. Every time I have seen this guy, he has been weird towards me, but my sister wanted me, my twin fraternal and 2 brothers in her wedding. The wedding is supposed to be next month in the beginning of May. My sister just told me that I'm going to be walking down the aisle with her fiancé's brother. I told her that he makes me uncomfortable and I thought I would be walking with my own brother. Apparently this is something her fiancé is insisting and she wants to make him happy. Seems like a pretty weird thing to insist and I know it's some scheme between the 2 brothers. My other siblings also thought it was weird and voiced their objections to our sister. She got upset and said this is her wedding and she'll do what she wants. I told my boyfriend this, and he was upset for me. He's confident enough in himself that he knows this guy would never be competition, but he knows how uncomfortable I am with this situation. The other day we had family dinner at my mom's house. I took this as an opportunity to bring up the all situation with my mother around. My sister got extremely upset and started crying, saying I was trying to ruin her marriage. I was so confused, as was everyone else, and tried to explain that he makes me and my boyfriend extremely uncomfortable. She then said that I can't bring my boyfriend to her wedding anymore and if I do, then I'm no longer a bridesmaid. She gave no reason as to why I can't bring him, and my siblings were just as upset considering they like my boyfriend a lot better than my sister's fiancé. I thought I would give her a few days to calm down and rethink, but she has not changed her mind. My 19-year-old brother's girlfriend is still invited to the wedding. My boyfriend is an incredible guy and has been nothing but kind and generous to my sister. His feelings are hurt, but he still wants me to go to the wedding. I think my sister is being an unreasonable jerk and I will be pretty pissed off at the wedding if my life partner is not there with me. Being her bridesmaid is something I can live without. So should I bring my boyfriend or go without him? Or should I demand that my boyfriend be allowed to come to her wedding and that she's being super unfair? I love my sister, but I don't understand why she's forcing some silly request by her creepy brother-in-law. I don't know what to do and my family is no help either. Update: most of the comments said I shouldn't go to the wedding at all, but she is my sister and I don't want to miss her wedding. I went to my parents' house with my brothers and told them about everything the brother-in-law has done. That makes me super uncomfortable and how my sister is disrespecting my relationship. My dad was pretty pissed off about the date stunt that she pulled and is on my side. My mom, however, says that I need to try and resolve this with her because if I am not part of the wedding party, people will talk. I honestly couldn't give a crap about what extended family has to say. My mom called a family meeting and told my sister and my twin to come to the house. My dad asked her why I was no longer walking with my brother, to which she responded saying that it's what her fiancé wants and she just wants to make him happy. I pressed the issue, asking why is this such a big deal for me to walk with him, and that he's super weird and I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to me. That really pissed her off. She started crying and yelling, saying a bunch of bull crap, how this is all she's ever wanted and we're trying to ruin her special day, blah, blah, blah. I was tired of the arguing and just straight up said, I'll go to the wedding as a guest, then I'm leaving before the reception. My twin and younger brother took my side and said they don't want to be in the wedding party if I'm not. This made my sister lose her effing mind. She was screaming now, calling me a bunch of names that I can't say and also calling my boyfriend names. I decided to leave and let my parents calm her down, but before I could walk out, she ran at me and yanked my hair, still screaming. She wouldn't let go, so I yanked hers too, and she let go. She has extensions and apparently I effed them up and ripped some hair out. She tried to grab me again, so I turned the face. I didn't mean it her. It was just my instant reaction to someone coming at me. So now she has a black eye, a cut on her cheek, and missing some hair. She's absolutely livid because her bachelorette party is next week. My mom is mad at me, my dad is not. My sister is now saying that she's going to press charges against me. Can she actually do that or is she just trying to scare me? She's also pissed off because my other siblings won't be in the wedding. She told my mom, if I apologize to her and agree to be in the wedding, she'll let me walk with my brother. I feel like that is bull crap and she will still make me walk with the brother-in-law last minute. At this point, I feel like it's not worth the trouble and I just don't want to go at all. My mom and dad want me to do what she asked because they're paying for the wedding and want all their kids there. My twin and younger brother said they'll do whatever I want to do, but I don't think I should be the reason they don't go. My boyfriend feels like he started all this drama when none of it is his fault. My sister believes I ruined her wedding. She ruined it herself, and I don't know what to do. So options are go to the wedding as a guest, be in the wedding, or not go at all. My parents will be upset if I don't go, and I really don't want any more tension. But she disrespected me in my relationship. As soon as this wedding is over, I'm going to limit my contact with her for a while.
My sister says I can't be in her wedding if I bring my boyfriend of 5 years. I met my boyfriend in college 7 years ago, and we started dating 5 years ago. He is super close and loving with my family. He was there at my niece's births, baptisms, Christmas, vacations, etc. We are extremely committed to each other for the long run but don't want to get married until we are financially stable and both our careers are where we want them to be. My sister has been with her fiancé for 2 years and engaged for 6 months. My sister is the type of girl who has dreamed of getting married since she was a little girl. It didn't matter who proposed, she just wanted to be married. I have never cared if I got married or not. As long as I have a good career and a happy relationship, I'm fine. In the beginning of her relationship, she tricked me into going on a double date with her fiancé and his brother. She had said it was dinner with her and a friend, and it was most definitely not. The brother kept making passes at me the whole time, and I told him I had a boyfriend, and the whole situation made me uncomfortable. At their engagement party, my boyfriend noticed that the brother wouldn't stop staring at me, and we tried our best to avoid him. Every time I have seen this guy, he has been weird towards me. But my sister wanted me, my twin, fraternal, and two brothers in her wedding. The wedding is supposed to be next month in the beginning of May. My sister just told me that I'm going to be walking down the aisle with her fiancé's brother. I told her that he makes me uncomfortable, and I thought I would be walking with my own brother. Apparently this is something her fiancé is insisting, and she wants to make him happy. Seems like a pretty weird thing to insist. And I know it's some scheme between the two brothers. My other siblings also thought it was weird and voiced their objections to our sister. She got upset and said this is her wedding and she'll do what she wants. I told my boyfriend this, and he was upset for me. He's confident enough in himself that he knows this guy would never be competition, but he knows how uncomfortable I am with this situation. The other day we had family dinner at my mom's house. I took this as an opportunity to bring up the all situation with my mother around. When my sister got extremely upset and started crying, saying I was trying to ruin her marriage, I was so confused, as was everyone else, and tried to explain that he makes me and my boyfriend extremely uncomfortable. She then said that I can't bring my boyfriend to her wedding anymore, and if I do then I'm no longer a bridesmaid. She gave no reason as to why I can't bring him, and my siblings were just as upset considering they like my boyfriend a lot better than my sister's fiancé. I thought I would give her a few days to calm down and rethink, but she has not changed her mind. My 19-year-old brother's girlfriend is still invited to the wedding. My boyfriend is an incredible guy and has been nothing but kind and generous to my sister. His feelings are hurt, but he still wants me to go to the wedding. I think my sister is being an unreasonable jerk, and I will be pretty pissed off at the wedding if my life partner is not there with me. Being her bridesmaid is something I can live without, so should I bring my boyfriend or go without him? Or should I demand that my boyfriend be allowed to come to her wedding and that she's being super unfair? I love my sister, but I don't understand why she's forcing some silly request by her creepy brother-in-law. I don't know what to do, and my family is no help either. Update: most of the comments said I shouldn't go to the wedding at all, but she is my sister and I don't want to miss her wedding. I went to my parents' house with my brothers and told them about everything the brother-in-law has done that makes me super uncomfortable and how my sister is disrespecting my relationship. My dad was pretty pissed off about the date stunt that she pulled and is on my side. My mom, however, says that I need to try and resolve this with her because if I am not part of the wedding party, people will talk. I honestly couldn't give a crap about what extended family has to say. My mom called a family meeting and told my sister and my twin to come to the house. My dad asked her why I was no longer walking with my brother, to which she responded saying that it's what her fiancé wants and she just wants to make him happy. I pressed the issue asking why is this such a big deal for me to walk with him and that he's super weird and I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to me. That really pissed her off. She's starting crying and yelling, saying a bunch of bull crap, how this is all she's ever wanted and we're trying to ruin her special day. Blah blah blah. I was tired of the arguing and just straight up said I'll go to the wedding as a guest, then I'm leaving before the reception. My twin and younger brother took my side and said they don't want to be in the wedding party if I'm not. This made my sister lose her effing mind. She was screaming now, calling me a bunch of names that I can't say, and also calling my boyfriend names. I decided to leave and let my parents calm her down, but before I could walk out she ran at me and yanked my hair, still screaming. She wouldn't let go, so I yanked hers too and she let go. She has extensions and apparently I effed them up and ripped some hair out. She tried to grab me again, so I whacked her in the face. I didn't mean to hit her, it was just my instant reaction to someone coming at me. So now she has a black eye, a cut on her cheek, and missing some hair. She's absolutely livid because her bachelorette party is next week. My mom is mad at me, my dad is not. My sister is now saying that she's going to press charges against me. Can she actually do that, or is she just trying to scare me? She's also pissed off because my other siblings won't be in the wedding. She told my mom if I apologize to her and agree to be in the wedding she'll let me walk with my brother. I feel like that is bull crap and she will still make me walk with the brother-in-law last minute. At this point I feel like it's not worth the trouble and I just don't want to go at all. My mom and dad want me to do what she asked because they're paying for the wedding and want all their kids there. My twin and younger brother said they'll do whatever I want to do, but I don't think I should be the reason they don't go. My boyfriend feels like he started all this drama when none of it is his fault. My sister believes I ruined her wedding. She ruined it herself, and I don't know what to do, so options are go to the wedding as a guest, be in the wedding, or not go at all. My parents will be upset if I don't go, and I really don't want any more tension, but she disrespected me in my relationship. As soon as this wedding is over I am going to limit my contact with her for a while.
What is one thing you accidentally taught your child that came back to bite you? My daughter was being bullied in high school by a few other girls. More than once they ganged up on her, slapped her around, and embarrassed her. The school wouldn't do anything but make excuses. So during summer break between her freshman and sophomore year I got her outside and taught her how to box. Gloves, punching bag, jump rope, the works. To be honest, I really didn't technically teach her how to box. I showed her how to get her wind up, keep her chin down, and taught her how to hit. How to punch through, to counter punch, and put together combinations. Put her shoulder behind it, and her hip into it. And she did well. Before summer was over I had the bruises to prove it. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I told her to walk away when she could. I made her promise. But if she found herself jammed up, don't just stand there and let herself get beat up. Well, once school started, it was only a few weeks before the phone rang. They told me my daughter was alright. Then right away, off to the principal's office I went. The same 3 girls had jumped on her again in one of the bathrooms. When I got there, the first thing I saw was 2 girls sitting in the outer office wearing bloody clothes. The secretary showed me right into the principal's office, and there sat my daughter without a scratch on her. The story was she took out 2 of them and the 3rd girl ran away. So we got through all of that, warning about this, threats of suspension if it happens again, blah, blah. About halfway through the school year, and my phone rings again. This time it's my wife. The school called, my little girl's been fighting again. Her best friend is a gorgeous sweetheart of a young girl, whose only physical flaw is she had been a breech birth. It damaged her hips, and she walks with a severe limp. They were in the school cafeteria and a couple boys were picking on my daughter's friend. Apparently it was more than she could stand, because my little girl got up and beat the snot out of both of those boys before anybody could stop her. Then when I got to the school, there they sat, in the same spot, bloodied up worse than the girls before. Now she had started beating up the boys, 2 at a time. After the dust settled, she was suspended from school for 3 days. I don't regret teaching her to defend herself, and if I encouraged her, that's alright too. Since she was mostly in the right, I took her side just as I promised I would. Update 2. My best friend thought that shoving her breast down my daughter's throat to calm her down was completely okay, so I came back home this morning after spending the night at a nearby hotel. I didn't feel safe staying alone in my house, since she had a copy of the keys. Even if I have a surveillance system, I didn't want to take the risk. The first thing I did when I came back was calling an emergency locksmith, explained the situation, and they arrived and did the job swiftly. I felt so much safer knowing that she can't get in anymore. I checked the house, but I was exactly as I left it yesterday, and after checking the surveillance tapes I was sure she didn't pay me a visit. I informed my close neighbors about what happened, and they were very understanding and helpful. I then met up with a mutual friend, and she updated me on the talk she had with her. She told me that she visited her at home this morning, because she wanted to talk to her face to face since she thought I was a little bit overreacting. Well, she went, my best friend greeted her and they started chatting a little before she invited her in. So far so good, until they sat down and my best friend asked her if they could keep talking while she pumped because she needed to get her supply running. Our mutual friend played dumb, saying that it wasn't a problem, but she asked why she needed to pump if she doesn't have children's. She replied back saying that she indeed has a daughter and that she was surprised that I didn't tell the mutual friend about it. She then pointed out that it was my daughter and that even if she didn't give birth to her, she still consider her as her baby too, and that she needed mamas, referring to her, milk to grow healthy. She kept going saying that she had no choice but pumping because I was being sassy and inconsiderate and I wasn't letting her breastfeed our baby, but that she couldn't be inconsiderate like I was and she needed to get her supply to a sufficient level, but that she was sure that I would change my mind in no time since I'm not stupid and I know that her breasts are better for our daughter. She told me that she couldn't believe what she was hearing, and that she couldn't believe that all of this was true, but what it shocked her the most was the fact that she was indeed lactating. She wasn't producing much, but she was indeed pumping breast milk. She tried to talk to her, but it wasn't no use, she just wasn't listening, and after a while trying she just said that there was nothing wrong in what she was doing and that she was just being a good mother, and after that she asked her to leave because she needed to relax while pumping. Unfortunately she forgot about asking for the keys of my house, but fortunately I was able to change the locks this morning. I honestly wasn't surprised hearing all of that, but still, it was very, very depressing. She was completely shocked and she couldn't understand what happened, since apart from this she seemed completely normal. I then asked her to accompany me to the police, and unfortunately there aren't no extremes yet to file for a row, not even a temporary one. According to what they told me where I live, solid proofs of harassment, stalking, etc. need to be presented, and the surveillance tapes/texts, which are the only things I have, don't show no harassment or clear evidence that she's stalking me. So the only thing I could was file a formal complaint of what happened, and did that. They told me that they will keep an eye on the situation, and they will check my neighborhood more frequently to be sure nothing happens. And that's it for now. The mutual friend will stay at my house for a couple of days to help me recover from what happened, also to wait for my parents to arrive. Unfortunately she doesn't know her parents, but she found a way to contact her ex-husband, and I will contact him tomorrow to ask for help. It's been a while and I hope he's willing too. I also booked an appointment with the pediatrician, and I will get my daughter checked next week.
What's the most hurtful thing you've overheard about yourself by accident? I had just moved into my dorm for my second year of college. My roommate was my best friend since 9th grade. My stuff hadn't arrived yet, and it was my time to register, so I asked him if I could use his computer. He said sure. I sat down, and he had AIM open to a conversation with another friend of ours. I didn't scroll up, but from what was just visible on screen, they were talking about how weird I was and how awful it would be rooming with me. I closed it so he wouldn't realize later I'd seen it, registered, and left. We still lived together that year, but we didn't hang out at all. We just cohabited. I never asked him to hang out as friends, he never asked me. Move out day that year was the last time we spoke. That was over 10 years ago. We chatted every day for 6 years, then haven't spoken since. I still don't know if I did or said something to flip how he felt about me, or if he never really liked me to begin with. The possibility of the latter really f's up your future friendships. Hell, the former does too, knowing apparently you're capable of unknowingly saying or doing something to throw away a 5-year friendship.
Am I the a-hole for calling my sister-in-law a beach? Hey there. So, I've been married to my wife for about 10 years, and we're a mixed-race couple. I'm Asian, and she's white. We get along with most of her family, but there are a couple of folks who seem not too fond of me. Now, let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm a chef with loads of experience, working at a fancy Chinese restaurant in a big city. My crew and I have won awards, and I'm going to be the next executive chef. On the other hand, my sister-in-law, Sarah, is also a chef, but she's all about the fancy French cuisine. She likes to compare herself to famous chefs like Ramsay and Bourdain, which, hey, is nice, but sometimes it can be a bit much. The trouble starts when we're at my in-laws' place and helping in the kitchen. Sarah always feels the need to give her 2 cents about my cooking techniques, and it can get pretty annoying. I've tried being polite and saying I'll stick to my own methods, but she just won't let up. Things reached a boiling point when we were cooking for my mother-in-law's birthday. Tensions were high, and Sarah just had to drop one of her comments. I finally had enough and told her firmly to stop criticizing my cooking because I've won more awards than her. But then she made a hurtful comment about my restaurant and the cuisine I specialize in, and that really hit me hard. Well, I might have lost my cool and called her a beach. I stormed out with my wife, and that caused a huge argument among the family. Some of them are on my side, thankfully, but others think it was just a joke and I shouldn't take it seriously. My wife wants me to apologize to end the fighting, but I'm standing my ground because I won't tolerate people disrespecting my techniques and skill because it's different than Therese. It's not about being too sensitive, it's about respecting each other's backgrounds and choices. So, that's where things stand. Hopefully, the family can come to a resolution and realize that everyone's feelings should be considered. Thanks for listening. What did your boss say to you during a meeting that resulted in you immediately resigning? I was teaching in 2 private schools. One of the schools had a young principal, a puffed-up guy all full of himself, who had been dishonest with me about his approach to discipline, without which I would not have signed up to begin with. After just 4 or 5 days, I'd had it, and asked if he had someone available to replace me. I asked the same question every 2 or 3 weeks. No dice. Around 2 months into the school year, I stopped by his office on the way out of school, on the way to my other school. I had 2 items to discuss, but only briefly, as I had to get to the next job. I raised issue 1, obscure John McLaughlin reference, for those who appreciate it, which Mr. Hotshot Principal turned into an attack on my teaching methods. Whatever, I was in a rush. When he was done lecturing me, I raised issue 2, a student who'd run out of time to finish his test, to which he immediately responded that we were not discussing it now. He clearly wanted me to stew about his reprimand regarding issue 1. I tried again. Again he refused to talk to me. He had no place to go at that hour. I did, but he wanted me to focus on his reprimand, and therefore wouldn't deign to give me 20 seconds to discuss the second issue. My first thought was to quit immediately. My second thought was not to be too rash. And my third thought came 10 seconds later, as I walked to my car. Am I nuts? I can't work for this sob. So I sat down in my car, and typed out my resignation letter, and immediately sent it to both Mr. Full of himself as well as his boss, a lovely guy, as it happens. I asked how long they needed me to stay on until they hired my replacement. Sorry, second school principal, for coming late to class that day. An hour later, Mr. Hotshot replied by saying that under the circumstances they would fill the job in-house, and my services were no longer needed. I later heard from former students that they had free periods for some time after my resignation, and later were taught by a very young replacement who had never taught before, and had no idea what he was doing, and could not control the room. My wife wasn't exactly thrilled when I told her that I had quit the main source of my income. Nearly 2/3 of my teaching salary came from the school I just quit. At the same time, my wife makes most of the money around here, so it wasn't the end of the world, but it would be nice to actually pay the bills around here. All this happened at the end of the work week. By Tuesday of the following week, I'd already spoken at length with not one but 2 other private schools. One school had been suggested by the father of one of my students in the school I just left. He called me to suggest a place he worked for which had a vacancy to fill. The other school actually called me, having no idea of what I was doing at that point, but they needed a teacher pronto and knew me from my prior time there, which had ended very well. By Wednesday, 3 school days after I'd quit, I was working in one of the new schools, and by the following week I'd already agreed to start for the other. Miraculously the schedule worked out wherein I could work at all 3 schools, making more money than I had before, teaching a total of 4 classes instead of the prior 5. God works in mysterious ways. As to the school I left, good luck, people. I still have a great relationship with the big boss there, and Mr. Fancy Pants is now their problem, not mine. I really want to unalive my uncle. Am I crazy? I want to unalive him so bad. My uncle bought me milk when I was a baby. He said he spent $20,000, around $350 to $360, because my mom couldn't afford it for a few months. Growing up, I knew he had anger issues, so I avoided making him mad. When he married, he lived next to his mother-in-law so I couldn't see him occasionally. I live with my grandmother after my mom remarried again. I only see him when my grandma visits them, and I always hear his wife saying she wants to annul my uncle or something. I thought it was just a husband and wife fight until my aunt died from cancer, leaving him and his 2 children. A girl and boy, they all moved back to my grandma, and of course, I help my grandma and aunt, who live nearby, to take care of the kids. I become their hands-on tutor. I give up my 5 tutoring classes, paying me approximately $1,500 per month, and their nanny when I don't have work. I am an author and affiliate marketing on TikTok. A few months were good. He seems to be doing well until we see some red flags. His first child is his favorite. He didn't shout at the girl or even laid a finger on her, but that's different with the boy. He constantly got mad at him and even told me that he would leave him behind, to the point that my grandma asked him if his wife cheated and the guy was not his child. The little boy looked like him when he was a child, so there was no way he's not the father. He even constantly says that no one is helping him in our household. He worked in construction and didn't contribute any amount to the house, except for Sunday when he buys food for lunch and his kids' week of snacks. All the money came into his pocket, and he could save. He even told me I should pay him for letting me take care of his children. He is constantly badmouthing how ugly his life is here because we don't give him money when his kids are sick, even when we tell him that we buy medicines for them, and he even calls us useless for not caring for his kids well. He said we don't feed his kids and don't give him the proper nutrition. He didn't buy any fruits and vegetables for us to provide his kids for the week. My aunt is the one who supplies eggs for them, and you also know how kids always refuse to eat vegetables. And here's the thing, I fought with him almost every week. I'm the one who buys groceries, so I know what food I buy and how much food I buy. Since he always went to work early in the morning, I didn't have the time to check if he stole any of my food. I just realized it once I woke up, and mostly, I don't have coffee to drink because he takes the 3-to-1 coffee to his work. We are the only one who drinks coffee because some don't like the taste of it. He gets bath soap that we buy for his children for himself. When I asked him about it, he got mad and said a mouse took it. I tutored his kids and had a problem dealing with his favorite child, who's already 7 years old but doesn't know how to write and read. I teach her daily, but she's having difficulty catching up. She never listened to me and only cared about how she was going to date someone someday or how she was going to apply makeup. I kept telling her to stop thinking about those things because she was only 7 years old, and my uncle got mad, saying she didn't need that and that it was okay if she acted that way. He even tried to punch me in the face. I am so stressed out to the point that I can't work when he's at home. Yesterday, he asked me about his clothes, and I said I don't know. He got mad at me and tried to punch me when my grandma stopped him. I don't feel any fear like when he wanted to hit me. I was thinking of things I could do to get back at him. I want to hurt him in any way possible. I want to kill him. I spend 2 hours doing drawings in my room just because I don't want to think anything stupid, but I can't help it. Ada for telling my son that if he's uncomfortable about his sister not wearing a bra then he should cover up too. My 33M daughter, 16F, got into an argument with her brother, 15M, because she sometimes doesn't wear bras around the house. She's still covered but she just wears a t-shirt instead. She said that wearing bras are painful and it makes her uncomfortable, so I didn't mind it. However, my son recently started expressing his discomfort and saying that it makes him uncomfortable and she should start wearing bras again. My daughter heard this and got upset and saying that she wasn't bothering anyone. He said that he was bothered by it and that she should cover up. I told her that if he's uncomfortable then maybe she can just put on a bra when she leaves her room. She got upset and told me that it's unfair that she has to wear a bra when her brother doesn't have to cover his man boobs. He got upset at this and accused her of making fun of him. I told him that she wasn't making fun of him and told him that it was a fair statement. I told him that if she's also uncomfortable then he should start wearing a shirt when he leaves his room. He started crying and accused me of calling him fat, which confused me as those words never came out of my mouth. I felt bad and wanted to let my son know that he misinterpreted what I meant, but when I went to talk to him he just told me to leave him alone and wouldn't stop crying, so I decided to give him some space. My wife told me that I know how sensitive our son could be about his weight and I should have been nicer about it. This made me feel extremely bad and I tried to apologize to him again, but he just ignored me and wouldn't even speak or look at me. I thought I was just being fair, but I don't know. My best friend is marrying my rapist. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my daughter to attend my BFF's wedding to her biological father? I, 27, have an amazing daughter, A, 12, and I'm married to the most amazing man, Ted, 27, in the world. My daughter and I have been living in Japan for the last 9 years, the home country of my husband. I returned to the UK for the first time since leaving this month, August 2023, to meet my nephew. My best friend, Renee, 26, and I have been best friends since we were 3 years old. She has always been my rock through everything, especially when I was pregnant with my daughter. As you can see, I gave birth to my daughter when I was 15. Her biological father, Dean, 33, has had no interaction with either of us since the night I got pregnant, nor ever showed an interest, until now. To address the elephant in the room, Dean roped me when I was 15 and he was 21. I come from a very religious family, also known as, my father is a deacon, there was no option. However, I absolutely adore my daughter and do not equate her to that horrible experience. She saved me and I have spent every day loving her thanks to a lot of support, therapy, and her just being the most loving little sweet peach out there. She doesn't know the nature of her conception because how do you explain that to any child under any circumstances? My husband adopted her, and she knows they're not related biologically, but they absolutely adore one another. Dean gave up all parental rights in a plea deal for a lesser sentence. I came back to the UK to meet my nephew, but booked to stay for a few weeks to visit my family and friends, but it was all a surprise. No one except my mum knew we were coming over. It was very fun and so lovely to see everyone's shock and surprise. My daughter is having the best time with her aunts, and they're also excited to see her in person. I decided to also surprise Renee, turning up at her house, ringing the doorbell and seeing the man who roped me was definitely the last thing I was expecting. I assumed by some twisted and cruel coincidence that I got the address wrong, but then her comes to the door calling him babe. It honestly felt like a horrible cliched teen movie where the main protagonist caught her best friend and boyfriend together. I knew she was seeing someone, but said that she wouldn't let me meet them until it was in person. She's my best friend, I had no reason not to trust her. I know that makes me stupid as hell, but I just never could have thought she'd do this. It's been 3 days since then and she has been blowing up my phone, begging to talk. I finally gave in because, as established above, I'm a moron. She said she was sorry for how I found out about them, and if I could forgive her for falling in love with my ex, which not only pissed me off but also my husband who knows everything this whole ordeal put me through. I cut her off, saying I couldn't have this conversation especially since my daughter was in the room, and she replied saying something like, well, she'll have to find out about the wedding soon for dress fittings. I asked her what she meant because no way did I hear that correctly, and she said that as her soon-to-be stepmom she wants her as the flower girl, as we have always said since we were growing up that our kids would be flower girl/ring bearer. I told her in absolutely no way, shape, or form would my daughter be attending that wedding. She said I was being petty and jealous and that I can't stop her real dad from being a part of her life. We've not spoken since this morning on the call, but I'm already receiving messages from our mutual friends saying that I've caused her to break down and ruined her wedding, but I genuinely believe I am not only morally right but also legally. Am I the a-hole?
What's your you're not joking moment? Had a neighbor who was a single guy in his 40s, divorced, had a college-age daughter that stayed with him half the time. Seemed like they were having a sort of family reunion one weekend, and I saw him talking with others out on his back deck. A little while later I went over to ask to borrow something. His daughter answered and I asked if her dad was there. She said her dad was dead, and I just chuckled and was like, haha, yeah right. She just looked at me and turned around crying and went back inside. Her mom, his ex-wife, came out right away and saw I was confused, shocked, and very apologetic. She was really nice about it, saying it had just happened and was the first time the daughter had had to answer the door. Apparently he ended it himself. I obviously felt so terrible, apologized profusely. I thought for sure I had just seen him, and the way the daughter had announced it seemed almost lighthearted. Turns out who I saw on the back deck was his brother, who looked a lot like him, and all the family was there for the funeral.
Survivor of a horrific car crash. What's it like to not remember what happened? I survived a horrific car crash, but I don't remember it. The last thing I do remember was eating mac and cheese for dinner. I was 20 years old, about to start my second year of college and spending the summer working for my dad and making extra money by running part-time babysitting jobs. My parents have a 24-hour daycare and my sister and I had been working there since we were in high school. I became the official driver for the daycare because I was the one who never got caught for underage drinking, or any other shenanigans for that matter. I enjoyed the job because it paid well and I always got to listen to music in between dropping off and picking up kids on my way to and from work. One day, a woman called to tell my dad that her daughter was sick and would not be able to make it to daycare. I was scheduled to be off work at 4 p.m. that day. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. I'm so sorry to hear that, my dad replied, but Caitlin is scheduled to be here until 4 o'clock. Since we really can't make up for the hours she'll miss, I don't know what other options we have. He put the phone down on the hook and walked out of his office. You want to make a couple extra bucks? He asked, as if it was something he asked me every day. God knows my dad was no philanthropist and he was never one to squander money, especially not his own. Sure, I responded, what do you need me to do? My dad then explained the situation with one of his daycare kids, who was 4 years old, named Natalie, and how her ailing cousin needed to be watched. Sure, I said, assuming it would be an easy hour or so of sitting and probably watching one of those Disney princess movies that was popular back then. Nothing exciting, just another day of teenage summertime boredom. I went over to my cousin's house, a few miles away, and picked her up. Little Natalie was a nice kid, she even gave me a flower she made out of folded craft paper. Thanks, I told her, I'm sure your mom will love it. I then strapped my seatbelt, turned on my blinker and started to merge onto the highway entrance ramp that took me into the city. I remember that on that particular day, when I put my blinker on, I also turned up my music because Natalie and I were about to have a girls' day out. A mother-daughter day at the zoo or an aquarium, something we'd been wanting to do all summer. When I merged onto the highway ramp, which was elevated due to the downtown lifeline running through the city, I don't remember anything beyond that. I don't remember my speeding car careening over the left-hand railing of the ramp, and plummeting over a ledge that landed the car 20 feet below into a parking lot filled with trash cans. I don't remember my head smashing through the windshield and falling out onto the pavement below. I don't remember oncoming traffic seeking a different route, who had to dodge through my car and avoid being unalived also, as it exploded into a blast of molten and flying metal. From what I hear from my doctors, bystanders who stopped to help, and my parents, is that there was nothing left of my vehicle, except for the Volkswagen logo on my dashboard. But those stories are all second-hand accounts because, as I said earlier, I don't remember the crash, waking up at the hospital, or the first few weeks after I woke up. Now, many years later I can still feel the brace they put around my head. The pain I felt in my face whenever I moved has now subsided, but I still can't remember anything past the point where I put my blinker on to merge onto the ramp that would forever change my life.
I keep finding long hairs in my bathroom, but my husband is bald and I have a short pixie crop hairstyle. So I went to investigate and I found out my husband's secret. This started a few weeks ago. While cleaning the bathroom, I found a number of long hair strands over my bathroom wall by the shower. This struck me as very odd because not only does my husband not have hair, but I also wear a very cropped, short hairstyle. So it's impossible for the strands I found to belong to either me or my husband. Confused, I washed them away but couldn't stop thinking about it. I decided not to mention it but kept looking out for them. There seems to be a pattern that hairs are appearing when I'm either at work or out for a longer period. I feel like I'm going crazy and feel like I shouldn't just immediately go to my husband cheating on me with a longer-haired woman. I asked my husband about it and he just shrugged. This makes me more paranoid as surely this is strange, so why is he so blasé about it? I'm starting to think he's playing it down to stop me from finding out the truth. It happened again 2 days ago and I asked my husband again. He dismissed it but this time admitted it was strange but told me the only explanation was that they must be my hair. They are not, and after saying so, now he'll just ignore me if I bring it up. I don't want to assume my husband is cheating on me and accuse him of such over something so ridiculous, but I'm driving myself into the ground trying to work out how the hairs have got there without my husband dismissing it as nothing. During the lockdown, we haven't had any visitors, that I know of, so can rule out his sister. I plan to leave work early, which is something I've never done before. My boss allowed me to leave after a half day. Upon returning home, nothing seemed amiss. I was expecting another car on the drive or parked outside on the street. There was no other car I didn't recognize. Quietly letting myself in, I was immediately confused. In the hallway, there was a pair of shoes I didn't recognize, and not only that, they looked like men's shoes. Standing in the hallway trying to work out what to do, if I should sneak around or make my presence known, before I could decide, my husband walked out of the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. By my husband's face, it was obvious he was surprised to see me. Playing along with naivete, I asked my husband how he could have known I was coming home early to make me tea. Expecting my husband to lie, he surprised me by sitting me down and explaining everything. At the beginning of lockdown, his friend, someone I'm not all close with because only met once, was evicted, lost his job, and had been couch surfing. So for some days over the past couple of weeks, this guy has been traveling to our house, and with the acceptance of my husband, using our bathroom to freshen up to attend to interviews. He was also borrowing shirts and suits from my husband. As it turns out, my husband's friend has long hair and a beard. So it turns out my husband isn't cheating on me but was hiding the fact his long-haired friend was coming over to use our shower. After his shower, I ended up meeting Dave, and he turned out to be a very nice bloke just down on his luck. I wished him the best for his socially distanced interview and he went on his way. I asked my husband why he didn't just tell me, as I wouldn't have had a problem with it. Turns out he was worried about my reaction and me not liking his friend or approving of the situation. He also told me Dave was very embarrassed about the whole situation and didn't want people to know what he was having to do. I told my husband I was starting to believe he was cheating and he was shocked, having not even considered those implications while attempting to cover for his friend. I told him this whole thing was ridiculous and even suggested his friend live with us until he was back on his feet.
My girlfriend of 3 years suggested an open relationship and I've been tormenting her ever since. For some context, I'm a bit of a sensitive bitch. My first serious girlfriend really fucked me up and it took a long time to get over it and learn to trust women again. In fact, the first girl I've legitimately trusted and allowed myself to open up to is my current soon-to-be ex-girlfriend. She knew about this and witnessed firsthand what a cold piece of shit I was to other girls. Before we got together, I was planning on marrying her in the not-so-distant future and she seemed over the moon about it. She brought up the idea of an open relationship before we got married and it was official and my heart immediately sank into my stomach. She was the one girl I didn't expect this from because she supposedly loved me and loved the idea of traditional marriage, kids, etc. She reconnected with some old friends recently who aren't too big on boyfriends/husbands, and I think they must have planted the seed. But it killed me nonetheless. All those feelings of anger and betrayal came flooding back and I don't think I'll ever truly get over it or trust women again as far as I can throw them in the context of a relationship. I sort of just went cold on her when she suggested the idea and said sure she would have shut it down if she gave an iota of a fuck about my feelings after she saw my reaction. But I guess she didn't. So I downloaded a bunch of dating apps and started reconnecting with some of the girls I used to sleep with. And with some of my other scumbag guy friends, 2 of whom are club promoters. I don't think I've stayed at our place for 3 consecutive nights, and I've been openly sleeping with other girls for months now. I can see how the way I'm going about things is devastating for her, but I just don't give a shit anymore. Emotionally speaking, it feels like I've just gone back in time. I walked in on her crying in the bathroom several times, but I just walked back out and shut the door. I don't ask her where she goes or who she sees. She's effectively just a roommate at this point, and I think that's what bothers her the most. We still have sex, but she's just another girl I stick my dick into. At this point, it's just something to do on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It doesn't hold any real significance or meaning for me anymore. I would move out and just get a new place, but the lease wouldn't be up for a while, and I'm saving money for a house, so just breaking up and moving on isn't a viable option at the moment. I honestly don't think I'll ever take what women say to me at face value relationship-wise ever again. All the I love you just seems like empty words. Fool me twice, shame on me and all that. It just seems like they'll stab you in the heart or hit you with the I'm not sure if I have feelings for you anymore routine. At some point I've given up on the idea of permanence as far as relationships go and I'll probably just find someone to have children and co-parent with at some point. The only people I need in my life to get any real emotional fulfillment. And who forever applies to our blood relatives and my 3 best brothers who have known for over a decade. Everything else is just temporary. Lol at it. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that I should have voiced my disagreement etc., but I think that would have been pointless. I'm not naive enough to think that she didn't already have someone in mind that she wanted. Fuck. If she hadn't already fucked him, that is. She knew what views in my history were and still decided to suggest something so disgusting. I mentally checked out of the relationship the moment an open relationship was mentioned. It's the most disrespectful and degrading shit you could possibly say to someone who has a modicum of self-respect. It's borderline cheating in my opinion. No amount of communication would have changed my mind on the subject if she thought she could have her cake and eat it. Too low. Maybe she thought I didn't have any options and I would just gravel and go along with her gross suggestion like some spineless worm.
Am I the a-hole for not allowing my daughter to go camping with her black boyfriend? My daughter Amy's dad and I started dating at college and she was born soon after. He is black and I have always been aware of my duties raising Amy in an inclusive way. She was darker when she was little but her skin has gotten lighter since puberty. After my divorce, when Amy was 3, I went back to live near my parents in North Missouri. My ex travels a lot for work so he is not a constant presence in our lives but he is still in contact and tries to see Amy at least a few times a year. The area where we live is not very diverse and I won't pretend to understand the exact lived experience my daughter had being black in an almost entirely white area but she can't credibly claim to have had a hard life in any way. She was always a great student, all her teachers love her, and has a lot of friends. She was never into romance until she met Ethan last year. They first met in an inter-district sports event as she is on the soccer team and he plays basketball. He lives south so they started a long-distance relationship. I was able to meet him once and he seemed to be very nice. His mom and I connected on social media and we became friendly very soon, because black women always find me delightful. Amy's 18th birthday is coming soon and she made plans with Ethan that I am not comfortable with. They want to go camping together and that sounds dangerous to me. I don't like the idea of them being alone in nature. An animal could attack them or they could fall into a river. Amy has no experience in an environment like that. She argued I was being unfair and that I was not getting that she has to have a long-distance relationship as she doesn't like anyone in our town. She didn't overtly say it is because they are white, she was implying it and that is not healthy. I dated both black and white men and it is valid to have preferences but I have also known some women that claim to only date black men and that has weird vibes. I don't say Amy is only dating Ethan because he is black but I detected a racial element in her fixation with him that worried me. Ethan's mom said their family has gone camping in that zone before and she thinks it is safe. She also told me their house is close enough from there so they could go if there is some kind of emergency, but she fully understands my hesitations and will support whatever I decide. I maintain they shouldn't go. I am trying to offer an alternative but Amy acted stubborn and is mad at me for being against their plans.
I just graduated from medical school, and my list of rules led me down a bizarre hallway. Have you ever walked through a hallway where everyone knew that you didn't belong? Imagine experiencing that in your own place of work. I kept my head down and my ears up as I traveled through the central corridor of the Children's Burn Unit of St. Francis Hospital. This hospital doesn't have a children's burn unit, even though I passed by a sign that proudly claimed it had been donated by the Friends of Cresswell Academy for Superb Children. Nope. This place didn't exist. I'd been working at St. Francis since July, and I knew every inch too of it. Maybe there was a wing that I had missed, right? But after advancing in a straight line for several minutes, I knew that was nonsense. I didn't go around any corners or encounter any walls. I certainly would have noticed a half-mile hallway if it were real. The people were off as well. There was a heavy-set nurse with frizzy hair who stared with distrust as I passed. I encountered her 3 different times along the same corridor, despite the fact that she could not possibly have moved ahead of me. Another nurse, frail and nervous-looking, tried to hand me a bag of blood. When I refused, she threw it angrily on the ground, where it splattered. I kept walking without looking back. My list of rules had been very clear about the fact that I was to continue in a straight line for 47 minutes if I found myself in this impossible place. I glanced down at my watch. It was 3:09 a.m., 6 minutes since I'd arrived in this impossible corner of hell. The employees became more insistent as I walked on. "Doctor!" A resident yelled at me as he jumped out of a room. "The patient is coding. We need you, stat." I carefully avoided eye contact as I moved past him. "Doctor!" He screamed, "You're killing her." I wiped away a tear as I continued forward, ignoring the unholy scream that came from the room. I'd heard enough patients to know what a death wail sounds like, but I had no choice. A minute later, I came across a pool of standing blood. It reached across to both walls of the hallway, and stretched 20 feet in front of me. As I watched, I could see it growing. A surly-looking man in a janitor's uniform stood by, arms crossed, staring at me. I didn't think he was actually a janitor. Without slowing down, I plodded through the blood. Squish, squish, squish. Damn. These were my favorite pair of Crocs. I entered a clear patch of hallway and checked my watch. It was 3:22. I'd been walking for 19 minutes, which was 13 longer than last I'd checked. The newfound quiet was more unnerving than the blood had been. Then, slowly, I could feel tension growing in the air. Imagine a strange man standing 2 inches behind you who you can smell but not see as his breath warms the back of your neck. That kind of tension was coming from the room ahead. Slowly, the door came into view. I could see the numbers 191 before I closed my eyes. I kept them shut tight as I went by. Vertigo nearly sent me tumbling as I passed the door. I didn't care about the possibility of walking into a wall. I kept my eyes closed for a long time after that. Miraculously, I didn't hit anything. When I finally opened them again, it was 3:27. 24 minutes to go. That's when the hand tugged at my back. "Can you please help me?" Squeaked a terrified voice from behind. I stopped walking. I considered my options. Then I continued forward. "Wait," he cried. "Please, I'm really hurt and I need your help." He grabbed my shirt again and started crying. I wiped both eyes and moved onward. The greatest challenges make us grow. But that feat is achieved through forcing some small part of us to die. Children only have the energy and drive to play outside because the world hasn't yet extracted its inevitable due. I knew that I had to obey the rules, but doing so killed a little piece of my soul. I'd become a doctor because I had believed that I could give all of me to a cause and keep getting out of bed each day without a diminished sense of purpose. But as I listened to the child walk behind me, crying loudly and begging for help, I accepted the fact that part of me was never coming out of that godforsaken burn unit. I passed the heavyset nurse again. Her eyes bulged as she saw the boy. "Doctor," she yelled. "You need to help that child." I walked past without acknowledging her. "Doctor," she screamed. "What is wrong with you?" I ignored her in the same way that I dismissed all the nurses, doctors, and patients who gawked at the boy in my wake. No matter what they shouted, I pretended not to hear them as I moved onward. What happened to him? Him? What happened to her? Why would anyone ignore a child in that state? Should we help him? No, the boy is her responsibility. The tears wouldn't stop, no matter how many times I wiped my face. I passed a doctor and another janitor. I recognized them as the people who had extracted Myron from the OR. They stared, arms folded, judging me as I went by. "Figures," the doctor explained to the silent janitor. She wasn't there for her little brother, either. I broke. I let my body double over and cried openly. Deep, ugly sobs heaved from my diaphragm, convulsing my frame as my mind teetered on edge. But I didn't stop walking. Doctors can compartmentalize when facing issues of life and death, and my life depended on constant movement. The boy clutched my shirt as I wailed, and we walked. For no less than 3 miles, I endured the most bizarre trial of my life. A sudden change in the acoustics prompted me to look at my watch. 3:51 a.m. 47 minutes had passed. I allowed one, final, shuddering sob. Then I stopped and looked around. I was in familiar territory. The first friendly face was Lydia, a nurse that I knew was from this world. I wanted to wrap her in a bear hug and scream in delight. She stared at me, her face contorted in horror. "What the fuck is that thing behind you?" I froze. Panicked footsteps came rushing my way. I stared in their direction instead of looking behind me. Dr. Scrit was in full sprint. "Dr. Aphelis!" She yelled. She was the consummate bitch, but in that moment I wanted to see her more than anyone else on earth. "It's been 47 minutes. I heaved in a shaking breath. "Should I look at it?" Dr. Scrit stopped a few steps away from me. Gravely, she nodded. I swallowed, then slowly turned around. I told myself that nothing is ever as bad as we picture it, because reality is bound by rules that imagination is not. I was wrong. Imagine a pizza with the cheese stripped off. A lumpy mass of marinara is occasionally interrupted by chunks of sizzling meat that sit atop a mound of blobby, yeasty dough. Now imagine that the pizza is a person, that person is a child, and one eyeball is hanging from an empty socket. And that child has no hair, because all the skin is gone from his scalp, and that he has a gaping hole where a nose used to be. "Help me," he whispered. "Help." His jaw fell to the floor, scattering teeth in every direction. The boy's tongue dangled from his open throat, flopping aimlessly like a dying fish. Then he squeezed my arm in a vice-like grip, screamed, and fell to the ground. I looked down at the motionless glob of flesh that had once been a child. "Dr. Scrit," I breathed, "is he?" "Don't be an idiot, Dr. Aphelis. He was dead long before you brought him here." I stared at her in sudden realization. "Like, more than 120 minutes before? Did your inane chatter suddenly achieve the ability to carry a body to the morgue, Dr. Aphelis?" She asked as she bent over the corpse. I'll find a gurney. No one signs up to be a doctor because she's afraid of getting blood on her manicure," she snapped as she lifted the boy's shoulders. "Grab the damn legs and let's hope his body has more structural integrity than jello. This cadaver's not going to walk itself to the crematorium." Dazedly, I bent down and picked up the boy's ankles. My stomach turned as his skin shifted under my grip like the flesh of barbecued chicken. Compartmentalized. Lydia held the door open for us as we carried the boy down the stairs, through the morgue, and into a corner where I had never needed to venture. I knew that the incinerator was there, but I had had no reason to use it. "It's too small to fit his body inside," I explained as I gasped for air. Dr. Scrit was clearly in amazing shape. She had nearly sprinted across the morgue, and I had struggled to keep pace while hauling the body. "What can we?" She grunted as she snatched the corpse from me and shoved his feet inside the incinerator. "If you're going to bore me to death with ridiculous conversation, Dr. Aphelis, then hurry up and make sure I'm dead before 120 minutes is up. Either that or fucking help." It's amazing what we're capable of doing when an imposing figure informs us that we have no choice. Side by side, we forced the boy's body into the narrow opening of the incinerator. When he got stuck, we just pushed harder. Both of us groaned with effort as his charred, melting flesh sloughed off like the skin of a rotting peach. Lumps of meat dropped to the floor as we peeled layers off the boy. But he was going in. We were pushing his shoulders through when his eye opened. Comment for part 2.
Parents or Reddit, what do your kids think they're being all slick and sneaky about, but you know all about it? My son is making a book for his mom to tell her how much he loves her. He's still pretty young and just learning to read and write. So slowly, like, over the course of the last few weeks, he'll bring a book up to an adult and ask them to help him read and then ask randomly, "Is the word amazing on this page?" "Where?" "Oh, can you help me find a story where they have that word?" "Oh great, is that the word I'm pointing to?" Then he disappears for a few minutes, then the cycle will start again with another word. Slowly he's writing a book for her, one word at a time. I know because I followed him one time recent and saw he was writing something in a book, then happened to check it out when he was asleep. So now I know his secret. He was up to about 2 pages and it's really sweet. I don't know how much longer until he'll deem it finished. But I'm sure I'm the only adult who knows what's up.
Have you ever changed a deeply held opinion? My 10th birthday was unofficially Christian themed. I received a new Bible, a cross necklace, and a book about relationships for girls from a Christian perspective. I don't remember what that book was called, but it was the equivalent of drinking 10 gallons of bleach. I know my parents didn't read it, or I guarantee they wouldn't have bought it for me. One of the book's main points was that you shouldn't date before marriage. It said that you should befriend various young men, and after years and years of friendship, you'll be able to determine who is a good Christian man and you can marry him. No in-between steps. You make friends and then you marry them. It gave all these other instructions on how Christian women should act: polite, quiet, subservient. That was a point it harped on time and time again. Good Christian women are subservient to men. The book would remind you periodically that you should let men lead wherever possible, because that's their role in life. In hindsight, the fact that my basically feminist, head of the household mother gave me this book is hysterical. I'm sure she saw it on the shelf, said, "Ooh, relationships, that's important," and bought it. She meant well. That book fucked me up, though. If I may be so honest, the idea of not dating at all didn't stick as much as the idea of dating equals serious relationships that last forever and end in marriage. I looked down on girls who dated around, because you shouldn't need to date so much to find someone you love. If you're dating around, you're slutty because you can't restrain yourself. Only the girls, though. Guys who dated around were insignificant to me. I believed that I'd failed or I'd been slutty when my first relationship ended. The one that was, no surprise, abusive. That's what pushing subservience gets you. If I'd been a good Christian, I wouldn't have dated and instead I would have waited. I should have known it was a mistake. I shouldn't have dated anyone. I should have made just friends and then things would have worked out. I was convinced that exploring romantic and sexual relationships without intending to marry the person was wrong, immoral, and stupid. Then I fast forward several years to today, when I'm no longer a Christian, not because of the aforementioned book, though I suppose it didn't help, and I've got healthy views on relationships. Not dating before marriage is the most bizarre, messed up ideal I've ever held. I strongly believe that dating around made you a slut and that dating required you marry the person in the end and that there was a certain and strict way to engage in relationships. Reading on Quora is really what ripped me out of it. Education is one hell of a drug, I'd say. I now strongly believe that anything consensual is a-okay. I believe that dating around just makes you a person who dates around, and not a slut. I realize that calling people sluts isn't cool and is a relatively meaningless but incredibly condemning term. I believe that dating and interacting, not just as friends but as a couple, is integral to having healthy and compatible relationships. I realize that dating and acknowledging that you won't be together forever is perfectly fine. I believe that telling anyone that they have to be subservient is setting them up to be taken advantage of. The greatest cure for toxic beliefs is a little more knowledge.
The year is 1910. Adolf Hitler, a struggling artist, has fought off dozens of assassination attempts by well-meaning time travelers, but this one is different. This traveler doesn't want to kill Hitler, he wants to teach him to paint. He pulls off his hood to reveal the frizzy afro of Bob Ross. Hitler was having a piece of banana cake when Bob Ross walked in, and I just feel like no one gets me, you know, the future Führer was saying to one of his servants, as he sprayed whipped cream over the cake, distracted. I mean, I know most artists are destined to be posthumous, but, I don't know, I guess I want the fame and the fortune too, you know. Yeah, it is very hard, my master, the man said, in a German accent but in English for no reason at all, just like foreign characters in the movies. Hey, Hitler, Bob said, stepping in, confident. May I? He pulled a chair, sat down without waiting for an answer. What is this? Listen, I'm Bob Ross and I'm from the future and I paint stuff. Bob Ross, yes, here's the thing, I'm supposed to come here and teach you how to paint so you'll be a good painter, and not invade Poland and then the rest of Europe and cause the death of millions of people. Holy shit, I do that. Hitler widened his eyes. Oh, yes, it's awful. People still use your name as a reference to evil. There's even an internet law based on how long it takes until someone compares a certain situation to Nazi Germany during an argument. What's the internet? Never mind, Bob leaned forward. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you how to. Excuse me, Hitler's servant said, in that same fake accent. I'm afraid I must intervene here. What's wrong? Well, Mr. Ross, have you considered the twist? The twist, yes, the fact that you'll teach this man how to paint. He'll grow to be a famous painter, not invade anything. And when you return to your hometown you'll find out that another man named, I don't know, Hans, has taken over Germany and did worse things than Adolf here could ever do. Ross frowned. I don't follow. You don't watch much Twilight Zone, do you? The servant asked. How do you know about the Twilight Zone? This is 1910. Never mind about that. The servant leaned back. My name is Hans Ross, and I will take over Germany if you teach Adolf how to paint. Why? Why would you do that? Why else would I be in the scene? Why would Hitler not be alone when you walked in? I have to serve some purpose for the plot, right? And let's face it, go back in time and kill, talk, convince, teach Hitler is a trope we've seen before, and it always ends like this. In fact, most time-traveling tropes tend to end with a silly variation of the butterfly effect. We made things even worse twist. Let's not make this prompt another example. Bob Ross scratched his head and thought about this. Shit, okay, I guess. But what do we do now? Now we find a way to subvert time-traveling tropes and present something fresh for the readers. And fast, because they're getting impatient. Why are they getting impatient? We're still at 500 words. Yes, but we've gone postmodern self-referential, characters acknowledging their own stories. That annoys some people. It's not really my fault. Look at the prompt. Where do you go with time-traveling Bob Ross and Hitler? That's not self-referential parody. Now you're blaming the opus for your shortcomings as a storyteller. Classy, not my shortcomings. I'm not the author. They both turn and stare at me for a second. I shrug. Anyway, Hans said, resuming the conversation. Do something different. Fast. But what? Fuh. Fuck, I don't know. Kiss Hitler. Erotic Nazi fanfic. No thanks. Okay, then. You have cancer, and Hitler nurses you to health. But in the end we find out Hitler has cancer too, and I'm not taking part in The Fault in Our Stars feat. Adolf Hitler. It ain't gonna happen. Well, you gotta do something, and fast, because time is running out. Hitler. Any suggestions? Adolf looked around. He got up and paced. I don't know. Can you just return to your present time and call it a day? And then everything happens as it's supposed to. That's boring. Yeah. Hitler stopped. I don't know then. I really don't know. Hans shook his head. Okay, I got this. He grabbed a little radio device from his pocket and spoke into it. Send them in. Ross frowned. Send who in? Static emerged from the radio for a second, then a voice answered. Copy that. Send who in? Adolf repeated. What's happening? Well, Hans said, getting up. If we're in a Hitler and Bob Ross time-traveling prompt and we can't figure out a way to turn it into something fresh, we might as well embrace irony and self-mockery to the full extent of writing prompts classic tropes. What do you mean? The door came open behind Ross. He turned back and watched as two teenagers walked in, a boy in round glasses and a scar on his forehead and a girl that looked a lot like Emma Watson. Hey Harry, hey Hermione, sorry to drag you into yet another prompt. You got the time turner. Yep, Harry said, in a bored tone. Harry Potter fanfic. Really? Ross shook his head. For fuck's sake, if we're gonna go down the rabbit's hole, let's do it proudly. Hermione started setting the time turner. Harry looked around, curious. Ross sighed. Fuck that. I'm out, Hitler said, and then he jumped out the window, and then WW2 didn't happen, but the statute of secrecy was violated on account of the whole thing, and muggles learned about magic, and when Ross returned to his present day no one gave a shit about static paintings anymore, so he died a poor man, which I guess is irony or whatever, I don't even care.
Found out my husband has another family, so I abandoned him in a foreign country without his passport. It doesn't matter how long you have been with someone, you can never know the entire truth about someone or what they're truly hiding. I thought my husband was the absolute perfect partner, and the 6 years that we had been together felt like pure bliss. We met at a work event. Since we have jobs in the same industry, we both travel a lot for our careers and we both love traveling as a hobby as well. In the first couple of years of our relationship, we traveled together to multiple countries on our shared bucket list, and each trip felt like another chapter in the never-ending romance novel that was our lives. He made me feel cherished and free. We explored the world together and I never thought anything, or anyone could come between us. But like I said, you never know what's going on in someone else's head, no matter how well you think you know them. It was an average morning the day I found out about his ugly secret. We woke up together at our shared apartment, and he scrolled through his emails while I drank coffee. At one point, he got up to use the bathroom and I remembered something I needed to look up. I didn't use his laptop often, but I just needed to look up one quick thing and I figured it would be okay. That's when one email in particular caught my eye. It looked like some sort of document sent by a contact with a woman's name. Something told me to just click on it. The document was some sort of children's elementary school form that my husband needed to e-sign. I was confused. Whose child was this? Why did my husband need to sign paperwork for some random kid? It just gave me a weird feeling and I decided to open his laptop back up after he left to get us breakfast that morning. I kept snooping. In the next half hour, I uncovered his entire second secret life that he had been hiding for about 4 years. It turns out that 2 years into us dating, he had cheated on me and gotten the other woman pregnant. She gave birth, and since then, he had been visiting them regularly and telling me he was on a work trip every time he was flying out to see them. I felt like I was watching some sort of horror movie when I eventually found his baby mother's Facebook and found years of family photos of them all together, smiling. I looked at his poop-eating grin in the photos and it felt like he was laughing at me. I couldn't believe he had planned out this entire fake double life of his and managed to lead me on successfully for years. I wanted to strangle him the moment he walked back in the door, but a bigger part of me wanted to show him that I could plan too. I could lie too. So even though it unalived me, I acted like everything was fine that morning. I even suggested we start planning our next trip. He was more than glad to, and by the end of the day I had booked our tickets to a week's stay in Morocco, a place I had been, but he hadn't. It was so hard for me to smile in my cheating husband's face. He was nothing but a worm and a liar to me, but I needed to make sure my plan went smoothly, so I kept playing the happy wife. The very first night in Morocco, I got him super drunk and he passed out pretty early. That's when I packed up every single thing in our hotel room, including his passport, and I left him there alone, while I took a taxi to the airport. I left him there, without his wallet, passport or phone. It's been about 2 weeks now and I haven't heard from him. I wonder if his baby mama is concerned about him. Too bad. I hope he's stuck there, feeling afraid, alone, and abandoned, just like me. My sister had me watch her baby with RSV without telling me he had RSV. I'm livid. My sister has 3 boys, her youngest just over 3 months old. I have a 16-month-old daughter who was born 9 weeks early and spent 8 weeks in the NICU due to her early arrival. She has a CHD in her lungs, have still not matured fully, and we see a cardiologist and pulmonologist every 8 weeks. A few weeks ago, I watched her baby for her, and a drop-off noticed he had a bit of a runny nose. Okay, guess it happens, you know? A few days later, my daughter got sick. Sick as a dog. Fever, awful running nose, fussy as could be. I was a little upset, but cults were going around, and again, babies got sick. It happens. Well, fast forward to this past Saturday. She asked if my husband and I could watch him while they moved. I said yes. She brings him by at a drop-off and says he still has a slight cough from last time left over, but it's not awful. I just wanted to let you know the doctor gave us cough meds, and we just gave him some a bit ago. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Again, I was a little irritated because she could have LED with this when asking me to watch him, but it was a small call from past illness. Again, I thought nothing huge of it, and maybe that is my fault. Fast forward to today. My daughter is acting fine as of right now. I will mention I got a call from my mom. My sister has spent all night in the hospital with her baby. Who is RSV? She told my mom. She was there with him Friday and was told it was RSV. She found out Friday that he had RSV and then had me watch him on Saturday with my immunocompromised child. How inconsiderate and irresponsible could you possibly be? To put someone else's child at risk? To put my child at risk? I fear for the health of her baby, but I fear for my daughters. Worse. Now, I'm not sure she would be able to handle RSV. And she's already been through so much. I'm so angry. I feel like this has burned the bridge between me and her. I don't think I will ever watch her kids for her again.
Teach him how to do your job, okay boss. In my former brief life of IT I saw something a little similar happen. At one point while in my junior year of college I was working on a contract with a smaller scale manufacturer of implantable medical devices, think pacemakers, etc., that was being bought out by a much larger manufacturer, I'll call them Company X, who manufactured a lot of other things, not just IMDs. The order management and customer database software in use on the sales side of the business for order tracking, processing, fulfillment, quotes, accounting, etc. was still terminal and mini-computer based, and it had been lovingly customized over many years by a number of programmers and employees who were both highly skilled and highly creative when it came to getting the best performance out of aging iron and legacy code. I was working on the PC networking side of things, as a helper/gopher, not coding or software engineering, but I knew a couple of the graybeards who were responsible for keeping that software and hardware up and running, and had much respect because they had probably forgotten more about computers than I had learned up till then. The software in use was supposedly difficult to learn, but once learned, it was apparently much faster than any of the point-and-click Windows-based apps that serve the same purposes. It was also highly customized for the specific field of implantable medical devices. In early 1999 the new owners brought in an outside IT consulting firm who conducted on-site review of the hardware and software in use to see if a better, cheaper, solution was available. The consultant spent a couple weeks at the office, made fun of the ancient system without talking to the people who were actually using it on a daily basis, then did what consultants do and submitted a report to the new CIO about how the software in use was obsolete, not user-friendly, too hard to teach to new people, replacement employees, and that too much money was being spent on paying the very experienced people who know how to both fix it and keep it online. It was suggested that rather than spending all of this time and money on the custom software already in use, that an off-the-shelf product would be much cheaper, more reliable, easier to learn, etc., and they could just customize it and make it work for the IMD sales and manufacturing business. Company X apparently totally bought into this load of crap from the consultant. My contract ended in Dec of 1999, so I don't know what happened after that, but from what I heard they ended up losing a ton of money and spending a lot of time trying to make the off-the-shelf software work before they gave up and went back to using the old software.
What is something that you used to do as a kid, and only realized years later to be extremely inappropriate? Being a girl, I got a lot of baby dolls when I was young. This being the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of them were pretty effing hideous, so I did what any girl would do in that situation. I scribbled over their faces with a red marker, then hosted a public execution for them for the crime of being ugly. I'd hang them with yarn and scrunchies around their necks, then buried them in the back of my closet to be forgotten about. I had my cuter stuffed animals and dolls watch, so they'd know what happened to ugly people. I was bullied a lot. During the night, rather than get up and get a tissue, I would put my boogers on the wall behind my bed. Apparently boogers turn into cement over time, and my mom was none too pleased when she moved the bed to paint the wall and found my masterpiece. When we were about 6 or 7, my friend and I, both female, used to play house. For some reason, it was decided that I was the house. I would lie on the floor and she would cover me with a blanket. My limbs were different rooms. My head was the bathroom.
My future sister-in-law is legitimately stupid, and I'm worried about my brother marrying her. My future sister-in-law, 25, is breathtakingly stupid and I cannot stand her, and I do not want her to be the mother of my future nieces and nephews. Our father lost his left leg below the knee in an accident before my brother and I were born, and when she first came over to our house to meet me and my parents, she said, "Oh wow, it's crazy how, me and my brother, didn't inherit that." We all laughed uncomfortably thinking it was a bad joke. She didn't laugh. Even after my brother explained it isn't a genetic defect, it was an injury, she still thought there was a possibility that my brother or I would be born with a missing leg. She told us she believed in Santa until she was 16, and her parents had to break it to her and it broke her heart. You know the joke that the pee is stored in the balls? She thought that was real. She asked my brother how come pee didn't come out when he finished during lovemaking. She commented that she never sees pink lemons in the store. She literally thought pink lemonade was made from pink lemons. She didn't realize Donald Trump the actor and Donald Trump the president were the same person. And speaking of Trump, she too tried to look at the solar eclipse without sunglasses, despite my brother pleading with her to keep them on. She thought blood diamonds meant they were made from blood, and we found out because she asked, "How come they aren't red?" She thought in order to play for a city's sports team you had to be from that city. So it confused her when one of our players got traded. She asked, "Well, what other team do we have here?" She didn't think platypuses were real. She once tried to correct me when I mentioned something being $100 million. She goes, "Don't you mean a billion?" Because she didn't think $100 million was a real number. She thought it was 99 million, and then 1 billion. She thinks the moon gives off light. I tried to tell her it's the reflection from the sun and she argued with me saying that couldn't be true because the sun was down behind the earth and if it was lighting the moon, it would light up the entire world. She thought Obama did the "I have a dream" speech. I could go on for days. She's been with my brother since he was in college. She was not in college with him. They met at a music festival. She literally said she didn't want to go to college because it seemed super hard. I have such a hard time being around her. I do not understand what the heck my brother sees in her. Do not get it. He's a software engineer making 6 figures, and she works as a hairdresser, so I see why she's with him. I want to ask him why he would want to marry such a moron. Like it's embarrassing when she talks and he brings her around people he works with. I would be mortified if I was him. I asked my parents about having an intervention with him after he announced that he was proposing to her, and they told me no, and that they thought she was sweet and that my brother considers her his best friend, and they work well together. Does no one else worry that she could make a terrible decision and severely affect my brother? Or when they have kids she could put them in harm's way? What could she possibly teach them? It's not a matter of her being innocently stupid, she could have real-life consequences to being this dim-witted.
My sister said that she's happy that my kids died because they would have turned out special, so I broke her face. My sister and I have never gotten along. My mother almost died giving birth to her, and because of this, she has been their miracle child. Even as kids, we would fight like cats and dogs on the best of days. There was a time when she pushed me down the stairs because I didn't want to lend her my jacket. I ended up with a sprained foot. My parents have always given her everything she's ever asked for, like when she asked to be enrolled in a private university that my parents can hardly afford. She has never had to work for anything, nor was she expected to follow the same rules as me when we were growing up, like going home by 5 p.m. and doing chores, or else I would have a lesser allowance. I've been in therapy for years, working through the resentment I had for her, and I've come a long way. Anyway, my husband and I had our first child almost 3 years ago after 5 years of trying and 3 miscarriages. My son is my parents' first grandchild. My parents adore him and spoil him rotten while respecting our boundaries. However, our son is nonverbal autistic. Meanwhile, my sister and brother-in-law have no children. My brother-in-law is in the Navy, and they have been moved all over the country. Now, on to the crazy. My sister and brother-in-law recently got new orders from the Navy to be stationed back on the mainland, though it was still across the country from where our family lives. They decided to come home to visit before they relocated since they hadn't seen family for a long time. My parents decided to throw a big family cookout so the family could come together and see them before they moved across the country again. I didn't want to go but knew it was important to my parents, so I decided to go anyway. My husband had to work, so I took my son to the party. Our whole extended family was there, as was my brother-in-law's immediate family. Everything was going great for the first hour we were there, but things started to go downhill when my sister came in, drinking a Red Bull. She set it down on the coffee table in the living room without even thinking about it. My dad saw this and mentioned that she might want to move her drink because small children were running around, and it could get knocked over. She said she would but never did. A little later, my son came running in, saw the shiny can on the table, and reached for it. He ended up dumping the whole can on the floor. My sister was pissed that her drink had been wasted. She looked at me and said I should clean up after my kid, but I replied, "Dad told you it would get knocked over. You should have moved it." My dad made my sister clean up the mess, which pissed her off even more. After that, she kept quietly making derogatory comments about my son to other family members, thinking that I couldn't hear them. I let the first few go, but after she called my son retarded to one of our cousins, so I'd had enough. I confronted her and told her that if she had something to say about me or my son, she could man up and say it to my face. She did get in my face and began screaming and cussing at me, saying that she wasn't surprised that my child turned out special and that it was a good thing that my first 3 kids died because I would have screwed them up too. I completely lost my crap. I don't think she was expecting me to retaliate because I punched her right in the face, and she went down hard. I'm not a violent person at all, but I do have limits, and I am fiercely protective of my son. I told her, it was a good thing that you don't have a child because no one would like to be born inheriting your garbage personality. Her jaw dropped. My dad and 2 of my cousins stepped in and broke us up. My mom dragged my sister off into another room and began screaming at her for saying such horrible things about my son. I went outside with my cousins to cool off, and while talking to them, my brother-in-law came out to apologize on behalf of my sister. I told him I appreciated it but didn't want an apology from him, only one from my sister. He mentioned that he thought my sister might be jealous of my son because he is the only grandchild, and now there has been a shift in the dynamic between her and my parents. That made perfect sense to me. With them doting on my son constantly, there was no room for them to spoil her. I took my son home shortly after all of this occurred. Honestly, I don't care if I ever see my sister again. I feel bad for ruining my parents' party, which they worked so hard on. Am I the astronaut for punching my sister?
Parents, what did you do to your child that they never forgave you for? I once punished my daughter for failing a class in high school. Now she is 25 and we haven't spoken in 8 years. My wife and I have always disagreed on how to raise our only daughter. She was a good kid but my wife never believed in punishment and I felt like we were spoiling her whenever she made mistakes and went completely unpunished. Some examples being, when she would come home past curfew, when she would dress inappropriately, or when she would take a long time to answer her phone or respond to our texts. Like I said, my daughter was always a pretty good kid, but every time she screwed up and I wanted to ground her and take away her privileges, my wife would always convince me not to. This led to never-ending arguments with my wife and when I look back on our marriage I'm surprised we even managed to stay together this long since we used to fight over our parenting styles so much. I love my daughter and I only ever wanted the best for her. When she was 17 I finally punished her in a way that made up for her years of unchecked mistakes, and she never forgave me for it. She has not spoken a word to me since that day 8 years ago. She and my wife are still close but she has totally destroyed any relationship we once had. It happened during my daughter's junior year of high school. She was usually a straight A student, but I received a call one day informing me she was in trouble of failing her physics class. She had been turning in all her work on time but was still doing poorly on the exams. It came as a shock to me since my daughter had always gotten excellent grades. When she came home that day, I confronted her about her physics grade. To be fair, she was super busy her junior year and was often stressed since she had a loaded schedule with sports, clubs, and AP classes as well. So when she came home that day, I could tell she was in a tense mood but I knew I needed to address her failing the class before she actually did. As soon as she walked in I told her to sit down. She looked annoyed at me but took a seat at the table. When I started lecturing her about her physics grade she told me she was struggling in class but she was still trying her best. I told her that sometimes her best isn't good enough, and she needed to get her poop together and make sure she passed this class. She got angry with me for my response, and screamed at me to please get off her back. As I said before, we never really punished my daughter harshly while she was growing up, and when she raised her voice at me like that something inside me snapped and I realized she needed a reality check. My daughter had a part-time job for about a year at that point. She used her paychecks to buy her first car, a crappy little thing from Craigslist but she loved it. I didn't know much about my daughter's life, but I knew she cared about that car. So that's the route I used to punish her. As soon as she walked upstairs after yelling at me, I went online and got a quote for junking the car. I scheduled to have it picked up and junked that afternoon, and about 2 hours after my daughter's little outburst, she got to watch a tow truck pull her beloved car out of the driveway. I stood in the driveway while the truck hooked up my daughter's car, and after a second my daughter ran outside to the driveway and asked what the hell was going on. I told her the truth. I said that she had been messing up at school and she would be paying the price after evading punishment her entire life. She was just crying and begging the confused tow truck driver to leave her car but I paid him extra to get it out of there faster. My daughter then called my wife who was at work but she had her phone off. After we watched her car get pulled out of the driveway, my daughter turned to me and said F you. Those were the last words she ever said to me, 8 years ago. My wife tore me a new one when she got home that day, and ended up undermining me by buying my daughter a new car in the same week. It was ridiculous. Anyways, I ultimately don't regret what I did even if it cost me my relationship with my daughter. She had to learn about the real world someday and I know I did the right thing by being the only person in her family to show her that actions had consequences. My bitter wife held a talent show at our wedding and became upset when her friend was networked by a producer. Now, she wants me to cut them all off. My wife Nancy wanted to do a mini talent show at our reception, and she talked it up beforehand too. She read a poem that she made for the event, and Kate performed a song that she wrote. Long story short, one of the guests who I invited is into producing, and he reached out to her after she performed. They exchanged information, and Kate was really excited. He wanted to network with her following the reception, and she even thanked my wife for hosting the talent show over text but Nancy became really bitter about it. She hasn't responded to Kate's message, and she said she regretted doing the talent show too. She also asked me to block Edward, the producer, on my socials or contacts, and I told her that seemed a bit much. She didn't like my answer and said that I was wrong to not take her side after just getting married, but I told her that she should be happy for her friend. She didn't like that either and vented to some in our friend group about how Kate was bragging, but some of them disagreed. She said she didn't want to hang out with them for the time being, and that included me too. Two of her girlfriends even texted me that she was overreacting and that they were also surprised to see her act that way. I asked if she'd be open to counseling, but she said there was no need for it because Kate was her friend first and I shouldn't choose Kate over her. I just want to ask what to do next since she refused to counsel and sees no issue with cutting off our friends. Nancy and Kate were not the only ones who performed in the talent show. During planning, Nancy said she wanted to showcase her friends and how awesome and proud she was to have them. She also said it was a bonding thing between her girlfriends and the girls were the ones who performed. However, given her post-reception 180, it really surprised me in comparison to her pre-talent show mindset. We had a vacation coming up, but she no longer wants to go on it. She's continued to have random mood swings due to thinking about Kate. Sometimes that's venting about how Kate would have nothing without her or getting really quiet and distant, even while eating. She's also still upset at her girlfriends who she vented to about Kate. When I asked her why Kate bothered her so much, she said she tried to publish in the past, a novel, and didn't get any hand-me-downs then. But when I reminded her that my friend was a producer on the side in his basement, she said I should have known better than to invite him, as if I should have known he would have liked Kate's song. When I told her that I wouldn't block the producer and entire friend group, she said I was entitled like Kate and that she wanted a break because I didn't care about her. I told her that I love her but didn't think it was healthy to cut off everyone. I also told her that she should be happy for her friend because Kate was really grateful, but she didn't seem to care. She has since gone to stay with her parents and left some of her things in our apartment. I talked to my dad after she ignored texts and calls for a few days, and he suggested bringing up an annulment because it had gone too far. I'm just really surprised and hurt that her bitterness turned me into a bad guy for inviting my producer friend as if I was supposed to see into the future and not invite him. Cheat on my friend and spend all her money? Get deported. So my friend, let's call her Coco, was really popular in high school, the type of girl that everyone wanted to be friends with and nobody wanted to cross. Coco was known to be promiscuous, but by senior year she seemed to have finally settled down and was in a stable relationship with a boy, let's call him Edgar. Edgar immigrated from Ecuador as a child but was completely Americanized, and I don't even think he spoke Spanish that well from what I can remember. He was the type of kid that was seen as kinda a bum to most at the school. He was nearing 20 and barely showed up to class, sometimes only to smoke behind the school and hang out with friends. I guess he was on some sort of program to get his diploma before he legally couldn't continue showing up. Regardless of this, he made my friend happy, so even if I didn't think he was Prince Charming, the first tolerated him. Coco on the other hand was head over heels. She worked every day after school at the local grocery store, and with her hard-earned money she spoiled the hell out of him. A new Xbox, shoes, taking him out to eat, the whole 9 yards. She kissed the ground he walked on, and I was of course skeptical, but again, she was happy and it wasn't my business. Things seemed cool for a while, but when crap hit the fan with ferocity. 5 months into their relationship he cheated on her. Not only did he cheat, but the girl he cheated with was freshly 14 years old and a freshman at the same high school. Keep in mind he's 19 and probably shouldn't even still be at the school. This 14-year-old girl wasn't exactly innocent. She'd had a reputation for a while for sleeping around with older men and looked around 17 to 18. Not to take away from the gravity of the situation, but to point out she was a very willing participant. I just feel it's needed context. News broke because this girl was bragging to all her friends about sleeping with Edgar, and I guess one of the friends told Coco. I was almost 100% sure that Coco was going to fight this girl. She, being 17 at the time, wouldn't have gotten into the trouble she would have being an adult. To my shock, however, that's not what she did. Coco was obviously devastated. The man she's adored for almost half a year, her first real boyfriend, and the thousands she spent trying to make him happy definitely tore her to pieces inside. Instead of fighting the 14-year-old and trying to socially execute her, however, she played it smart. Here's where the nuclear revenge came in. This 14-year-old knew Edgar was with Coco and obviously feared Coco and the social power she had at the school. It was clear that she was scared to death of even showing her face once the news broke out, expecting to have to fight Coco or having to attempt to save her social life. What went down, however, was nothing like that. Coco messaged the girl on Instagram saying pretty much this: "Hey, I know what happened between you and Edgar, and I just want you to know I'm really sorry he took advantage of you like that. I think we should meet up and talk about it. I know it's not your fault." Coco didn't really believe this girl was preyed upon, and I'm sure she was even pissed at her, but it was important to her master plan that the girl took up the victim role. They end up meeting and Coco pretty much showers the girl in affirmation that she's a victim. Edgar is the evil Baphomet child of Satan, and that if she went to the police that Coco and our whole friend group would stand beside her and care for her. Long story short, the decision between social self-deletion and a fast pass to the popular group wasn't too hard for this girl to make, and she ended up going to her guidance counselor the same day. The guidance counselor listened to what happened and promptly called the police, who pulled Edgar out of class and had him handcuffed outside in a public spectacle. When the ugly truth comes to light, it's worse than anyone could have imagined it. Not only did Edgar and this 14-year-old get it on, they did it in the school bathroom. His mugshot was plastered on the news and everyone was talking about it. After multiple hours of Coco gaslighting this girl and telling her all the right things to say to the police, he was charged. He ended up getting charged with statutory rope, on top of another charge because it was on school grounds. He got $50,000 bail, which he wasn't able to pay, and better yet, they were deporting him to Ecuador. The place where he had no remaining family, barely spoke the language, and that's only after he served his 5-year sentence in the United States. Throughout the entire trial, Coco pretty much coached the 14-year-old, telling her to say she was scared and felt pressured to do it, when in reality it was all on her own accord and nothing new to her. She complied with everything Coco said in order to save her social reputation. She even continued to brag about her sexual endeavors to us, but as long as it wasn't Edgar, we were happy to entertain it. We were young and dumb and living life like we were in an early 2000s teen movie. Looking back, I can tell the girl definitely had some issues with male attention. Regardless, for the rest of our senior year, Coco let the girl tag along with us and treated her really well. Even bringing her to senior prom is a loophole for the LGBT students. 3 years later, the girl is seemingly doing great. I see her on social media from time to time and she's enrolled in college for the fall semester. Coco has a new boyfriend she's been living with for over a year now, and Edgar is still in prison awaiting his deportation. Looking back, I realize how messed up the whole situation was. The 14-year-old definitely had some problems in her life and Coco was definitely manipulative. Sometimes I even feel bad for Edgar, but at the end of the day she was still 14, so even if she was totally down with it, it's still illegal. I don't think either side was exactly doing the right thing. It's not like Coco actually cared about the 14-year-old like she pretended she did. At least the girl had a nice time for the rest of high school. Coco just wanted to scorn Edgar and scorn him.
What random person that you met once and never saw again do you still think about? When I was about 6, we met a family with our exact names. Dad, mom, son, daughter. And we don't have usual names. First and last. I often wonder. When I was 10 years old, I won tickets to a pre-screening of Jumanji from the local kids radio station. My parents dropped me off and I went all alone, and I had a really great time. There was this boy sitting next to me, and he was really cute, maybe a little bit younger than me, but around the same age. We watched the movie together and chatted, and after the movie was over we said goodbye. All I remember about him is that he was black and I think he was wearing a striped shirt. I wonder about him a lot, which is silly because we literally met once when I was 10 years old, and I'm 30 now.
My wedding was ruined. I had spent months planning my wedding day, and I was so excited to finally be able to tie the knot with the love of my life. Everything was perfect, from the venue to the decorations and the guest list. But then, as I was walking down the aisle, I heard shouting coming from the back of the room. At first, I thought it was just someone being rowdy and having too much to drink. But as it got louder, I realized something was seriously wrong. Suddenly, a group of people burst into the room, armed with weapons and screaming obscenities. They started attacking my guests, hitting them with chairs and tables, and throwing things around the room. I was in shock, unable to move, as I watched the chaos unfold around me. My guests were screaming in terror, trying to escape, but the attackers were relentless. I felt like I was in a nightmare, watching the violence unfold in slow motion. Finally, the police arrived and managed to bring the situation under control. But by that point, the damage had already been done. My wedding was ruined, my guests were injured, and I felt violated and traumatized. I couldn't believe something like this could happen. I had left my home that day thinking I was going to marry the love of my life, but instead, I had been attacked by a group of violent individuals. It's hard to put into words how it feels to have something so important taken away from you in such a violent and senseless way. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, and I'm determined to get justice for what happened to me and my guests. I'm doing my best to move on, but it's hard when I'm constantly reminded of that horrible day. I'm determined to keep fighting, keep loving, and keep hoping that one day, events like this will be a thing of the past. I'm also determined to make sure that something like this never happens again, and I'm working with the authorities to ensure that the attackers are brought to justice. I refuse to let them win, and I'm determined to make sure that no one else has to endure the same trauma that I did.
I tested the orange peel theory on my boyfriend and now I'm going to break up with him because of how badly he failed. What is the orange peel theory? I was scrolling on TikTok when I saw a post about the orange peel theory, which to sum it up is when you ask another person to do a small task for you, like peeling an orange or asking them to tie your shoes for you. Both of these are tasks that you can do by yourself. The real test is how they respond to you. If they respond with "you can do it yourself, can't you do that?" or "I guess," then they are not willing to do small tasks for you and will most likely fail to do larger tasks for you in the future. However, if they do it willingly or take the initiative to do it immediately, then they pass in a way. Now on to the situation. My boyfriend of 8 years was sitting in the couch when I saw the TikTok video explaining the theory, and I decided I should try it out. Up to this point we were happy, but now looking back on it I am not surprised by how he responded. I told him to peel an orange for me because I didn't want to get my nails dirty, and he looked straight at me and said, "Tough luck, buddy." I asked him if he was serious and he began to get really mad, saying, "As if I don't do enough," and he began listing the things he does for the house, like cleaning his own laundry, and that I'm not special so I shouldn't expect any favors from him. I just stared at him in disbelief and started tearing up a little. He started to mock me, crying, making loud baby noises, and I didn't know whether to punch him or shrivel up right there. I left the room crying and I didn't talk to him for 3 days. He came around and apologized, and I tried talking to him about ending the relationship, but he instantly went into a rage and told me I was an idiot for breaking our relationship up because of a TikTok trend. And looking at that fact, I could see how ridiculous I was being, but I can't get it out of my head how he laughed at me while I was crying. Should I break up with him?
Today I effed up by intentionally lighting our house on fire. When I woke up, everything was normal for a few hours. My mom and dad making breakfast, and I was checking out the presents. My parents believe that it's always good to share the holiday spirit with everyone else, so they brought up the idea to invite my brothers. I wasn't very fond of the idea because me and my brothers aren't really close with each other. I think the reason why is because they are male and I'm female. I have 4 brothers and I'm the youngest out of all of them. Let's call them Samuel, Caleb, and Walter. Not their real names. A few hours go by, and my dad calls my brother because they were supposed to arrive at 10 a.m. It was 11 a.m. My second older brother, Samuel, used to live with my oldest brother, Walter. Samuel says that Walter went without him and didn't pick him up or anything. My dad isn't a guy to get pissed off without a reason to, but he does have some anger issues. My dad isn't yelling, but he's talking in a stern way. He calls Walter and Walter has a different side of the story, saying that he was getting ready, and Samuel was in the living room, sitting down. My dad hangs up, obviously irritated, and me and my mom try to calm him down. A good 30-ish minutes pass by, and Samuel and Walter arrive. I have already opened my stocking and was just having a good time. Walter and Samuel walk in, and my dad walks up to them and starts yelling at them. Walter is not a guy to be a wuss, so he starts yelling back at my dad. My dad and my brother have been yelling at each other for a good 30 seconds, and it soon grabs my attention. My brother leaves my house, and my mom says, "Don't follow after him," she calmly tells my dad. My dad screams back at her, "I'm tired of them bringing us in stuff." But still doesn't listen to my mother and follows after my brother, slamming the door behind him. Keep in mind, I have one other brother who arrived moments before they started screaming. Walter comes back and gives me a gift card and says, "Merry Christmas." My other brother follows after my brother, Walter, trying to convince him to stay for the holiday. My mother also has anger issues, but it isn't as bad as my dad. My mom goes to their room, where they hidden the presents. With pure malice in her eyes, she started throwing presents around their room. Since it was only me and my mom at the house currently, I had to do something. She started muttering, "Want presents? Well, here, you can have them." I grabbed presents that were on the floor and I hugged my mother. She stopped for a moment, then pushed me back. I stayed on the floor for a good 10 minutes, tears started to fall down my eyes and I couldn't stop crying. Me and my mom stopped hugging, and when she looked at my face and saw me crying, she looked down, with shame. But didn't for a moment stop destroying the gifts. I ran to the bathroom and for a whole hour, I stayed there, crying. My brothers and my dad came back, and I knew because the walls aren't very thick. But no one came to check up on me. After an hour and a half, I exited the bathroom and went into my room. I went on my phone and thought Christmas was over for me. 20-ish minutes passed by, and my dad comes in my room. He then sat down and said that this happens all the time. I ignored him, though. After only another 30 minutes I could hear my family fighting again. That was the last straw. I took a matchbox and some alcohol, and dumped it all over my bed and my parents' bed, and waited outside while the whole house was lit on fire. At that point everyone was outside and Jacob only suffered a mild burn. I told everyone about how dysfunctional this family was, and then left. My narcissistic mom demanded I give my mansion to my golden child sister because she's pregnant and needs it more than me. I have a sister that has honestly been the golden child to my mother but not my father for as long as I can remember. My parents divorced when I was a teenager because my mother cheated with an old high school ex-boyfriend and has always been controlling, manipulative and narcissistic. And sadly my sister was like her little mini-me. Our mother also seemed to believe she had total authority over me anytime she so much as snapped her fingers. She'd snap them and order me around like a dog. It was demeaning. And my sister always backed her up too. So no surprise I went to live with my dad full-time after our parents split while my sister stayed with mom. The two of them were very alike and both pretty much stopped speaking with my father unless it was about money. Though I'm more like my dad. My father was very business-oriented and started teaching me how to do his line of work as soon as I was 16. I got pretty good at it and after 12 years of working for my father I was made a partner in his company. But then about 8 months ago tragedy struck. My father had developed a weak immune system due to being a heavy smoker for much of his life and died at only 60 years old after he caught the virus. I met my mother and sister for the first time in years after we had a socially distanced funeral for my father over video call. My father was cremated by his own request and buried in a local cemetery. So there was no body or casket. My sister seemed to grieve, but my mother looked indifferent the entire time. Though I honestly was not surprised. The last time she saw my father, she screamed at him that he owed her more money and then threatened to sue him. To which he just laughed at her. He'd paid alimony and child support as long as he was legally mandated to and no more than that. He even put $30,000 toward my sister's college fund. But 10 years after the divorce he was no longer legally required to send mom money anymore because of the judge's ruling. And she's by no means broke. She works the same job she has had for nearly 3 decades, fully owns the old family home we used to share, and even rents out 2 of the rooms in it to Airbnb regularly. Sometime after the funeral my dad's will was read. Apparently he'd figured that if his heavy smoking didn't eventually do him in, something else would and even joked about it in a pre-recorded video. I was pretty much willed nearly all of his assets from most of his money to his business and home. He left my sister a car 2015 Nissan Altima, and about $10,000 in cash. My mother only got $1,000 and a few other items that she'd been claiming were rightfully hers since the divorce. Beyond that I got the rest. My girlfriend now lives with me in the house my father passed down to me. My sister pretty much went from finishing 2 years of community college to living off her boyfriend and only working part-time online for several years. During that time she got pregnant but suffered a traumatic miscarriage. I wasn't aware till after the funeral because we were practically no contact and no one else told me. When lockdown hit, her boyfriend's job started downsizing little by little and eventually he was only able to stay on part-time. Which hampered hers and his finances to the point he was finally telling her she needed to look for better employment as well since he was trying to find a second job. And then she got pregnant. She claims she and her boyfriend were careful, but calls it her miracle baby. One evening I got an unexpected knock at my door. When I answered, I was unpleasantly greeted by both my mother and sister. They both walked right in without even asking and made themselves comfortable in my living room. My girlfriend and I shared a look of confusion, and I asked why they'd come by. My sister was giggling and looking all over, opening doors and seemingly giving herself a tour of my home. My mother had just plopped herself down on my sofa and snapped her fingers while demanding a cold bottled water. My girlfriend got the water for her, and I asked what they were here for. My sister seemed all giddy and just ignored me to continue snooping around my home. And before long I heard her yell from down the hall, "Mommy, it's perfect." My mother finally spoke up and said, "Well, I think it's time to do your brotherly duty. Now that your father has passed, this house should have gone to me since I was his only spouse. But you can still fix this. You make plenty of money and could just buy a new house. Your sister needs this one so much more since she's the one with a baby on the way. But if you're so determined on staying, you could just stay in one room and cover all of the bills until you decide to move out." I took a deep breath and stated out loud, "That's not effing happening. You don't order me around. Especially not in my own goddamn home. Yes, I make plenty of money. But like Dad, I'm gonna save it for when I really need it. Not that you care." My mother started snapping her fingers at me like she used to and loudly stated, "Stop. I am your mother. And you will do as I say because I brought you into this world, and I'm the one in charge here. And as far as you're concerned, I am God. That means when I say jump, you say how high? This house is rightfully mine and your sister will live here. Consider this your formal eviction. But since I'm gracious, I'll give you 2 weeks to pack your bags and transfer the deed to me." In the back of my mind I'm thinking this can't be real. But then I just grabbed my cell phone and started dialing. My mother quickly stood up and yelled, "What are you doing?" And I retorted, "I'm doing what I should have done as soon as this started. I'm calling the cops to get you out of my effing house." She started swiping at me and managed to knock my phone out of my hands. Then she proceeded to try and stomp on it, but I was quick enough to snatch it up before she could. I yelled out, "That's effing it. If you don't leave I will force you out myself." My mother proceeded to slap me across the face and I returned the favor twice as hard backhanded. So much so I ended up knocking her back down onto the couch. She held her hand over her reddening face in total shock and then yelled, "How dare you!" I went back to dialing on my phone and said that if she didn't leave, I would have the police come and remove her by force. My sister came barreling in between us, holding her arms out and saying that I should just do the right thing for once in my life and be a good big brother. I snapped and said, "Oh really? I'm the bad sibling? Last I checked I was the one who's had to work for a living since I was a teenager. I had to do all the chores in the house while you just sat on your butt playing video games or talking with your friends all day. And you used to steal my hard-earned money just to go out shopping after you spent all of your allowance. You're a complete mooch and thief. So I don't owe you anything. Now both of you get out before I decide to dial this last number." My sister started to tear up crying like a baby and said, "Mommy, make him stop." My mother began hugging her and kissing her cheeks while giving me a death glare. Then she seemed to think she'd gotten smart and said, "You know, if you do call the police I can just tell them that you hit me. And who knows, I could maybe say to everyone you wanted to do a lot worse to a poor pregnant girl in need. I don't think that'd be a very good thing for your—" I cut her off with a raised hand and said, "Just stop. If you haven't noticed, my girlfriend over there has had her phone out recording almost this whole time. And that means we have recorded evidence of you assaulting me first and openly stating you'd lie to the police. I don't think that'd be so good for your reputation at your job, or your little Airbnb. If looks could unalive my mother would have blown me up like a tactical nuke." But she quickly deflated and started dragging my crying sister out by the arm. My sister was somehow acting like a complete toddler and broke loose of our mother's grip to sit down on my porch step and have a tantrum. I just gave my mother a look and said, "Do you see now? This is the result of the spoiled way you raised her." She glared at me again and then I was treated to a show of my mother trying to drag my sister off of my porch steps. But she latched onto the porch handrails and kept saying, "You promised me," over and over again. I let out a cackle and told them both from the door to never come back. My mother flipped me the bird and then went back to trying to drag my sister off the porch. It took a few minutes, but she finally got my sister to get up and leave with her by saying I am a cruel, heartless bastard who will go to hell for this. I laughed some more and said that there's also a special place in hell for liars and narcissists who try to manipulate others to get their way. My mother clenched her fists and was about to say more when I just held up my smartphone again with it recording and said, "The clock is ticking, Mom. Get off my property." My mother then walked my sister to the car, gave me one last snooty look and drove off. I thought that was the end of it, but letting things go was never something my mother was good at.
What are some guy secrets girls don't know about? If you really want to impress your husband/boyfriend, intentionally have side-by-side time with him. Pick an activity or hobby that he enjoys and just do it with him. Don't ask him if he's enjoying himself or what he's thinking. If you have to, literally just sit next to him on the couch and watch the game with him. If he's comfortable with it, quietly watch him build his computer or ask him how it works. Keep the conversation about the activity. Avoid asking him how he's doing unless he brings it up. Literally just be there with him. Ask a guy how his day is. Fine. Ask a guy to explain something about his favorite hobby. You will be there for hours. This is a generalization, but I think there's some truth in it. I think women tend to bond through verbal communication. And they get worried/nervous to just be there with their partner, side by side, because they aren't actually doing anything. But guys see that as bonding and caring.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? During the last year of my grandfather's life he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma of course kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral and a man showed up that wasn't known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that it wasn't exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral home who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later my grandmother let slip that she is seeing someone, the guy from funeral. At this point nothing too odd. They got to talking at church and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later sweet innocent old grandma mentions that it's their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa died 2 years prior. This man was the person that Grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought Grandpa was going crazy. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being a vegetable for the last horrible year of his life. I thought he saw someone in his house before he died. Turns out it was Grandma's boyfriend.
What's a fun fact that isn't fun at all? Your brain blocks you from feeling your organs moving around inside you. Only 1 in 1,000 sea turtles born actually make it to adulthood. When a whale dies, lots of gases build up in their body, causing very high pressure, eventually to the point after many weeks where the whale will blow up due to the high PSI. Body debris are flowing in the ocean. When you're burning, the first thing that starts to melt is your eyes. The average life expectancy in Cambodia under Pol Pot's regime was 17 years old. A teratoma is a kind of tumor that can grow hair, teeth, or even eyes. The Japanese were so brutal in World War II that the Nazis themselves had to ask them to chill out. Sloths sometimes mistake their arms for tree branches and fall to their deaths.
My friend and his wife are going through a mutual divorce. Her new boyfriend is wasting no time asserting dominance. If you have a minute, could we discuss the mortgage and how to deal with it? Hey, this is Mike. If you want to talk about anything, you talk to me. You got it? I would, but Sarah and I are the ones on the mortgage and she has the information I need to get this squared away. You don't listen too well, do you? I said if you're going to harass my girl it's not gonna end well for you. Never mind, I'll just have my lawyer take care of it. Lol. You would have your lawyer step in, wouldn't you? You can't handle me so you run to the police like a loser and have lawyers trying to jam me up. You think I'm scared of that bull? Bring it and see what I do. Put me in jail over words and I'ma take you to the pavement quick. I'll see if my lawyer could get you a dictionary. So apparently employers want a 2 weeks notice, but waiting 2 weeks to start is now a disqualifier. I recently had a run-in with the bullshit that is the modern hiring process. I was working at this shitty fast food joint, barely making enough to scrape by, when I finally got sick of the constant abuse from my boss and decided to start looking for something better. I found this amazing new job posting that sounded perfect, great pay, good hours, the whole 9 yards. But then I read the fine print. They wanted me to give a 2 weeks notice at my current job before starting. No big deal, right? I was planning on quitting anyway, so this seemed like a decent enough compromise. But then I got a call from the hiring manager a few days later. Apparently, waiting 2 weeks to start was now a effing disqualifier. Like, what the F? How the hell am I supposed to give a notice and start immediately? I was so goddamn pissed off, but I really wanted this job, so I decided to play along. I lied and said that I could start right away, and they hired me on the spot. Fast forward 2 months, and I'm effing miserable. The job sucks, the pay isn't as good as I thought, and I'm constantly stressed out. And to top it off, I'm now getting insane amounts of poop from my boss for not being a team player or whatever the F. I should have listened to my gut and not taken this effing job. But I was so desperate for anything better, and now I'm paying the goddamn price. I've had enough. I'm done with this system. It's all just a bunch of bullshit designed to exploit desperate people like me, and I'm effing sick of it. So I've decided to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to find a way to fight back against this oppressive system and make sure that no one else has to suffer like I have. It's time to take a stand and show the world that we won't be taken advantage of any longer. Thanks for listening, y'all. I needed to get that off my chest. Now it's time to take action. Wish me luck.
What are the craziest fan posts? My fiancé told me I had to shave my hair for my sister-in-law. I just got proposed to about a week ago. My fiancé adores his little sister. She is 19. She is very childish and playful. My fiancé loves her for it and called her unique. I didn't mind that part, but I did mind that every time I said something, she interrupts me. Whenever I have big news, she also steals my thunder. If I confront her, then she will burst out crying and my fiancé would comfort her without saying a word to me. On the day of our wedding, during my wedding, my sister-in-law went up to the front, where me and my fiancé were and started crying and yelled, "I have cancer." Everyone felt bad, except my bridesmaids, and me. My best friend, Ashley, confronted her about walking up here and not waiting to tell people later. She was at the wedding sitting down, FaceTiming her friends on full volume before she yelled about her news. Turns out she wasn't lying, because she started losing hair. When she lost all of her hair, my now husband insisted that I shave my hair for a wig for my sister-in-law. I said no. This time, my husband didn't insist. He demanded. I told him no, then ran because of both of their selfish behaviors. Why would I give up my hair? I asked my husband why, and he said his sister loved my hair. I told him earlier she said it looked like a rat's nest, which was true. He didn't believe me. My husband was then always on my sister-in-law's side until I was done with it. I ran, and got divorce papers in the end.
My boyfriend cried in front of me for the first time. It changed our lives. I've been with my boyfriend for 2.5 years now. He's never been comfortable talking about his emotions. The only person he's ever confided in was his mother when he was a child. Some people refer to him as a robot. Obviously, in the past, I've expressed my desire for him to talk to me about things that are affecting him, but he just brushes it off. I'm also quite introverted myself, so I struggle to make him feel like I'm a safe person for him to be vulnerable with. I don't know the right things to say. We've fought about it in the past, and he has said he just cannot get the words out. He's described it as having a ball in his throat whenever he tries to express himself, and he is simply unable to. I had never seen him cry. When I could tell he was visibly down, I tried to encourage him to share with me, but he just denied that anything was wrong. Earlier this week, his family found out that his mother will be passing away very soon, potentially within a couple of weeks. It came as a surprise to all of them. I knew it hit him the hardest because she was the only woman in his life with whom he could be vulnerable. I asked a good friend of mine for advice on how I can make him feel comfortable being vulnerable around me. I was worried I might mess it up in his time of need. She told me I should offer to wash his hair, and that stuck with me. I don't know why, but I felt like I would appreciate it if my partner offered to do it for me when I was feeling down. Well, when he eventually came home, he looked extremely worn out. I had already prepared dinner, so we sat down to eat, but we pretty much ate in silence. He hardly even looked up from his food. I asked if he wanted to talk, and again he brushed me off. Once we finished, I asked him if he'd like to shower with me. It had been at least a couple of days since he had been able to have one. I dimmed the bathroom lights and played some relaxing music that we both enjoy on the speaker. I made the shower nice and hot, gently helped him undress, and had him sit on the bench under the water while I finished undressing. I joined him on the bench and slowly washed him all over, taking breaks to rest my head on his or whisper something to him. I spent a while massaging his head as I washed his hair. I kept kissing him on the lips, forehead, and neck, occasionally embracing him. I rubbed his shoulders in places where I thought he might be sore after being up and about for 2 days. There was nothing lustful about the atmosphere. It was a completely different type of intense intimacy that's difficult to describe. He hardly said a word during all this, and he looked like he could cry at any minute. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to pressure him into anything, so I just looked into his eyes, smiled, and said, "It's okay." Once we were done, we both sat there for a while on the bench under the water, not speaking, just enjoying each other's company. I kept running my hand up and down his back, across his cheek, or through his hair, trying to make him relax as much as possible. After I dried him and myself off, we got into bed, and I turned on the TV. I was half watching it and half playing with his hair. I asked if he wanted to talk about anything, and he shook his head. I could tell he was really upset despite his attempts to hide it. Maybe 20 minutes later, I could see him literally on the verge of tears. I rolled to my side, put my arms around him, and pulled him into my chest. That's when he started. The tears began to flow, and he sobbed and sobbed. He was holding onto me so tightly that sometimes it was difficult to breathe. I could feel years of bottled up emotions pouring out. He continued crying harder, and it broke my heart. He said something about his mom, but it was muffled, and I couldn't hear it. Seeing the man you love like that, clinging onto you as if you were going to leave, while he let it all out, hurt my heart. I felt so bad for him that I had tears in my eyes too. I just held him tight and kept whispering how much I loved him, that it was okay, that I'm here for him, and so on. Even when he eventually stopped sobbing, he continued to have his arms wrapped tightly around me, with his face buried in either my stomach or chest. I just kept comforting him until he fell asleep. Usually, I don't like cuddling while sleeping, but that night, I held him all night long. I couldn't bring myself to let him go. It's hard to explain the way I was feeling during all this. Obviously, it was terrible that he was going through this, but at the same time, I was so happy and relieved. Is that weird? It was an emotional experience, seeing the man you love more than anything show negative emotions on that level for the first time. I remember almost every detail of that night. It's etched in my memory. I haven't brought it up to him yet. I figured maybe it's best to let him talk about the evening when he feels ready. But then again, I also want to be able to tell him that it was okay and a good thing that he did. I think he's a bit embarrassed that it happened, so I don't know if he'll bring it up. I hope he does, though. I've read some women say that once they've seen their man cry, they lose attraction. That just seems bizarre to me. If anything, I feel even more attracted to him than before. It's like it has amplified my love for this man. I never want to let him go. What's the hardest thing you had to accept about losing a parent at a young age? I was just 18, working at a goddamn mountain ski resort, when I got a call from my old man. He said he'd be home in 2 days and wanted me to meet him at the airport. It had been 6 months since my mom passed away, so it was just us two left. During the call, he told me he got offered a job in another country and wanted to come home for one last goodbye. So I decided to leave work early the next day and drove 6 effing hours to get there. But when I arrived, it was chaos and distress everywhere. Broken glass all over the tarmac and bloodstains on the plane door. It didn't look good. Reports started coming out about a missing plane with no survivors on board, and that's when I knew something bad had happened to my dad. I waited around for hours trying to get more information, but they wouldn't let me near the wreckage or anything like that, so frustrating. Eventually they let me in there looking for any of his belongings, something we could use as closure or maybe have some kind of funeral service if needed. If anyone knows how this works, please share. So with heavy heart I searched through all this charred remains of what used to be an aircraft, hoping against hope that I'd find something, even if it was just his wallet or something like that, but nothing turned up until finally near where they thought the cockpit had landed after being ejected during impact or explosion. I found his pocket knife with our initials engraved on it. It felt like someone punched me right in gut, because now here were no answers, only more questions. Was he alive? Did he somehow manage to eject himself from plane? Did he survive impact against all odds? But one thing became painfully clear: my father wasn't coming home today or anytime soon. And once again here I was alone without any family members left except myself. Cheat on me? Enjoy this permanent reminder. 6 years ago, my whole life fell apart. My girlfriend and I had been through a lot, or so I thought. We were having arguments more often. I wanted to talk about our issues, like how she wasn't helping much around the house or contributing to our expenses. But every time I tried, she'd turn it into a big drama, making me feel like I was overreacting. Then, one day, things got even more effed up. A friend sent me a photo of my girlfriend sitting at a cafe with a guy from work, my coworker. The text read, "5th time I see them together. Who is he?" My heart sank. She had been texting and making plans with someone named Brianna, who turned out to be none other than my coworker Brian. I decided to confront her, but not in the usual way. You see, she had always wanted a tattoo, and I saw an opportunity. I convinced her to get matching tattoos, something to celebrate our 2-year anniversary. She agreed, and 4 days later, we found ourselves at the tattoo shop. As she got inked, I felt a mix of emotions. I couldn't believe what was happening, but I knew what I had to do. After the tattoo was finished, I took my spare house keys from her, showed her the photo my friend had sent, and ended our relationship right there in the tattoo shop. It hurt, but it was the right thing to do. I couldn't trust her anymore. It turned out that 1 month later, she started dating Brian, the same coworker she had been seeing behind my back. It was a difficult year for them, and in the end, they, too, went their separate ways. Looking back now, it's clear that sometimes you have to make tough decisions for your own well-being. It was a painful chapter in my life, but it taught me the importance of trust and communication in a relationship. It also taught me that it's very fun to be petty and that seeking revenge made me so happy and proud.